Chapter 656. Unfortunately, the newcomer did not answer the evil immortal of forgetfulness's question. He continued to stroll forward under the cover of the witchlight. It was also at this moment that a large number of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals rushed over and surrounded him in an instant. Clearly, the immortals of the celestial court had sensed the huge commotion caused by the destruction of the southern heaven gate. At this moment, many divine ambassadors were rushing over to the southern heaven gate, which even alerted the Empyrean fairy in the jade pool. "Where is Yi Xian?" De Yi's witchlight covered his body. He did not feel anything when the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals surrounded him. His voice also echoed in the 33 celestial court. "Set up the heavenly cycle star formation and take down the witch tribe member." The evil immortal of forgetfulness's face darkened in the face of De Yi's disregard. He ordered the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals to set up the heavenly cycle star formation. The dazzling brilliance of the stars spread out and turned into a huge immortal net that fell on De Yi. It was immeasurable and impenetrable. De Yi was a sage-to-be and a peerless expert of the witch tribe. How could the heavenly soldiers and evil immortal of forgetfulness be his match? Bang! Thousands of heavenly soldiers turned into bubbles. The evil immortal of forgetfulness was annihilated inch by inch. He did not even have time to scream before he was annihilated in the void. It was a terrifying scene that no one dared to look directly at. "A great enemy is here." The immortal official of Celestial Court screamed in horror at this scene. He even rang the golden bell of the Celestial Court continuously. The rapid sound of the bell reverberated in every corner of the 33 Celestial Court, causing the entire Celestial Court to fall into chaos. On this day, the Celestial Court was in turmoil because of De Yi's arrival. As De Yi strolled through the broken southern heaven gate, he headed straight for the Lingxiao Hall. Along the way, countless heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals heard the news and attacked him, but all of them were annihilated in the void. They could not fight against him and could not withstand a single blow. These simple words fully explained De Yi's terror. He did not need to attack personally. When his eyes were destroyed, the laws of heaven and earth were in chaos. Anyone who attacked him died tragically on the spot. Retreat, retreat again, retreat again, retreat again, an extremely shocking scene appeared. The celestial soldiers and celestial generals kept retreating with their weapons. Although they had surrounded De Yi, their eyes were filled with fear. De Yi continued to walk forward, surrounded by the celestial soldiers and celestial generals, as if they were invisible. "How dare you, shaman! Die!" Suddenly, a beam of sword light tore through the sky. The murderous aura shook the void. The green light was too resplendent, and it was stabbing towards De Yi's forehead. De Yi furrowed his brows and stopped in his tracks. He raised his palm and pointed it at the green light. Clang! Shen Gongbao held the celestial slashing sword in his hand and was thrusting it towards De Yi. However, De Yi held the sword between his fingers. No matter how hard Shen Gongbao tried, the celestial slashing sword could not move an inch forward. The celestial slashing sword? De Yi frowned slightly. He did not do anything, but an extremely terrifying force was exerted on the celestial slashing sword. With a loud bang, Shen Gongbao was sent flying, and the celestial slashing sword fell into De Yi's hands. "The sword is a good one. Unfortunately, your cultivation is too weak to hurt me." De Yi shook his head slowly and threw the celestial slashing sword out. A Tongtian sword chime was heard, and the celestial slashing sword stabbed into the ground in front of Shen Gongbao. The terrifying force caused the ground to crack. One move, just one move, and Shen Gongbao, who was holding the celestial slashing sword, was defeated. This stunned him, as if he could not believe such a thing. "Impossible, how can you be unharmed?" Shen Gongbao trembled and roared. He stared at De Yi, unable to believe what he had just experienced. The celestial slashing sword was one of the 4 celestial slaying swords, and also the spiritual treasure of the Tongtian. It was known as the most lethal weapon under the heavenly way. Even a sage-to-be would not dare to say that he was unharmed after being hit by the celestial slashing sword. Unfortunately, Shen Gongbao did not know that De Yi was a grand sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe. His cultivation was already extremely terrifying, and his physical body was indestructible. Although he was not as terrifying as the 12 ancestors of sorcerers, the celestial slashing sword could not hurt his physical body. Of course, this did not mean that the 4 celestial slaying swords were not powerful, but the physical body of the sorcerer tribe was terrifying. Moreover, Shen Gongbao was only at the 2nd stage of Daluo realm, and could not unleash the full power of the celestial slashing sword. "Where is Yi Xian? Ask him to come and see me." De Yi spoke calmly and looked coldly at Shen Gongbao. He did not kill Shen Gongbao because of the Tongtian. After all, the one who could wield the sword must be a disciple of the Tongtian. The Heaven Emperor is in seclusion. "Who are you?" Shen Gongbao picked up the celestial slashing sword and looked at De Yi with trembling eyes. However, no matter how hard he tried to guess the identity of De Yi, he could not figure out who De Yi was. "I am a grand sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe. People call me De Yi." De Yi said calmly. "What?" As De Yi's words fell, Shen Gongbao's face turned pale instantly. He took 3 steps back and his body trembled unconsciously. He looked at De Yi with an extremely horrified expression. Shen Gongbao was not the only one who looked like this. At this moment, the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals who surrounded De Yi gasped. The weapons in their hands dropped weakly, and an extremely heavy atmosphere grew at this moment. De Yi. A name that had never been heard of before. A person who had killed the 9 great golden crows in the ancient untainted land. A peerless expert of the sorcerer tribe, and a sage-to-be of the sorcerer tribe. He was also an immortal legend in the 3 realms. The sage-to-be was already extraordinary. The sage-to-be of the sorcerer tribe was even more so. They were said to be invincible among those in the same realm. However, because their physical bodies were indestructible, even sage-to-be was much weaker than the sorcerer tribe. When the legendary figure appeared in the celestial court, not only Shen Gongbao was trembling and speechless, the immortals who were rushing from all directions were dead silent. This was because everyone knew that a great calamity would befall the celestial court today. De Yi, an ancient grand sorcerer of the untainted land, his name alone was enough to shock the world. Now that the real person had appeared in the celestial court, how could they not be frightened? The Queen Mother has decreed that De Yi of the sorcerer tribe is invited to the Lingxiao Hall for a chat. Suddenly, Venus Taibai hurried over. He held a horsetail whisk and waved the heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals back. At this moment, he was forcing a smile and nodding to De Yi. However, the heavy look in his eyes was too strong. Obviously, he knew that De Yi did not come with good intentions. The Queen Mother. The Empyrean Fairy. De Yi murmured to himself and then nodded slightly. Under the guidance of Venus Taibai, he walked toward the Lingxiao Hall. However, as the 2 of them walked, the 33 layers of celestial court became eerily silent, causing a large number of celestial soldiers and celestial generals to retreat. They also put away the weapons in their hands. In the face of such legendary figures, their current formation was just a joke. Chapter 657. Lingxiao Hall. The golden door was wide open and the immortals stood side by side. The celestial emperor's throne was empty and the Empyrean fairy was sitting on the phoenix seat. She stood up from the phoenix seat and walked down the white jade stairs, waiting for De Yi's arrival. A series of heavy footsteps came from outside the Lingxiao Hall. De Yi walked into the Lingxiao Hall slowly. The Empyrean fairy smiled and looked like a mother of the world. "I have long heard of the name of De Yi of the sorcerer tribe. It is my honor to meet you in person today." Zhoutian Xian NV bowed. She had a magnanimous look on her face and no one could find any fault with her. "It is Yi Xian's fortune to be able to marry you," De Yi said softly. You flatter me, great sorcerer. I dare not accept your compliment. However, great sorcerer came to the celestial court to destroy the southern heavenly gate and kill the soldiers of the celestial court. I'm afraid you've gone too far, haven't you? 9 Heavenly Maiden said with a smile. However, her words were slightly sharp and she was questioning De. You're an interesting woman. Is this your way of doing things? Trying peaceful means before resorting to force? De walked forward and stopped when he was 3 feet away from the Empyrean fairy. He looked down at her condescendingly. You are a demi-saint of the sorcerer tribe and a peerless expert among the ancient great sorcerers. Although the celestial court is said to be in charge of the 3 realms, we do not have a demi-saint. No one in the celestial court is your opponent. How can you say that I have to be polite before I use force? The Empyrean fairy said with a smile. What a sharp-tongued woman. De smiled coldly. He did not want to argue with the Empyrean fairy because this was not his original intention of coming to the celestial court. De, although you are a demi-saint of the sorcerer tribe, do you want to start a war between the sorcerer tribe and the celestial court? Suddenly, the rock demon walked forward and the Daluo's celestial light bloomed. As a peak Daluo and the strongest fighter of the celestial court, it would be unreasonable if he did not stand up now. Little golden-winged rock, is this the place for you to speak? De's eyes narrowed and his voice suddenly became cold. When he stretched out his hand, the space around him changed and a terrifying palm appeared above the rock demon and suppressed him. Ah! Sorcery light sprinkled down and revealed its original form. De's cultivation was too terrifying and unbeatable. It suppressed the demonic rock on the spot and even forced it out of its original form. It transformed into a 3-foot golden-winged giant rock and howled in pain in the sorcery light. Stop it! The Empyrean fairy scolded coldly. The smile on her face disappeared and she looked at De with an extremely cold gaze. However, there was anxiety in her eyes. You are a woman and I do not want to make things difficult for you. Ask Yi Xian to come out and see me. De put his hands behind his back and looked down on the world. He did not care about the immortals present. It had to be said that De was too strong and unsolvable. With his cultivation, this was an unsolvable dilemma for the immortals of the celestial court. De, are you trying to start a war between the sorcerer tribe and the celestial court? Don't forget that the celestial court is watched by the saints. If you go too far and provoke the saints to punish the sorcerer tribe, you will not be able to bear the consequences. The Empyrean fairy bit her lip. The celestial court could not suppress this person in terms of strength. She could only use the saint's power to pressure De. Ha! Suddenly, De laughed maniacally as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He looked at Xian Nv of the 9 heavens with disdain. Don't say that you are Nua's disciple and Yi Xian has the support of the Tongtian. However, do you think that the sorcerer tribe will be afraid of the insignificant celestial court? Or are you saying that you so-called immortals are the enemy of the sorcerer tribe? At this point, De paused for a moment. Then, he looked around at the immortals present and said in a disdainful voice, remember, if the heavenly court did not have Tongtian's backing, the sorcerer tribe would be able to destroy your heavenly court easily. Furthermore, do you think that the sorcerer tribe will be afraid of the saints? De's voice rumbled. The immortals of the celestial court turned pale and the Empyrean fairy clenched her fists tightly. However, she could not refute him. Just as De had said, the sorcerer tribe was not afraid of any forces in the world, even if they had the support of the saints. Although the sorcerer tribe did not have any saints, they had the 12 ancient sorcerers. The 12 ancient sorcerers were of the same generation as the 3 pure ones. They were also descendants of Pangu. The 12 ancient sorcerers could condense the real body of Pangu. Even the saints had to be wary of them. Endure. Enduring was the only choice for the Empyrean fairy and the rest of the immortals. Ask Yi Xian to come out and see me. De Yi's voice reverberated throughout the 33 celestial court. The Empyrean fairy's face turned pale because Yi Xian was not even in the celestial court. The celestial emperor is in seclusion. Forgive him for not receiving guests. No matter what the great sorcerer wants, I can make the decision. The Empyrean fairy said coldly. You can make the decision. De Yi's lips curled into a cold smile. He looked straight at the Empyrean fairy and said, I want Yi Xian's life. Can you make the decision too? Silence, silence, extreme silence. When De Yi finished speaking, the temperature of the entire Lingxiao hall suddenly dropped to the extreme. A silent fear spread throughout the Lingxiao hall. Everyone looked at De Yi with fear in their eyes. After a full 10 breaths, the Empyrean fairy exhaled and said, the celestial emperor is not in the celestial court. Even if you make things difficult for us, it's useless. He's not in the celestial court. De Yi slowly nodded. He didn't think that the 9 heavens maiden was lying, because ever since he'd caused such a huge commotion in the heavenly court, Yi Xian hadn't appeared from the beginning to the end. Obviously, the other party wasn't in the heavenly court. It's all right. Since he's not in the celestial court, I'll wait for him to return. However, I have to tell you one thing. If he's not in the celestial court, I'll kill one of his officials. If he never returns, I'll destroy his celestial court. De Yi spoke calmly as if he was talking about something very casual. However, his words made the Empyrean fairy's face turn green with anger. The immortals looked at each other angrily but did not dare to refute him. Everyone could tell that Yi of the Shaman clan definitely wouldn't leave until he saw Yi Xian. Moreover, from his domineering way of doing things, he definitely wasn't trying to scare everyone. It was obvious that he would really do as he said. If he didn't see Yi Xian for a day, he would kill a person until Yi Xian appeared in front of him. I've heard people say that when Yi Xian killed the Jade Emperor and Queen Mother, he said that the celestial court took turns. Today, he came to my house. Since Yi Xian does not dare to see me, I'll temporarily take charge of the 33 celestial courts for him. I'll see what's so special about the celestial emperor's throne. Under the shocked and angry gazes of the immortals of the celestial court and the Empyrean fairy, De Yi walked to the celestial emperor's throne and sat down in front of everyone. He looked at the immortals of the celestial court as if he was the ruler of the world. Chapter 658. It was a humiliation, a great humiliation. The celestial court was facing a great calamity. The immortals were furious but did not dare to say anything. This was the current state of the celestial court because no one could subdue De Yi. From this, it could be seen that although the celestial court looked impressive on the surface, it was still a far cry from the other orthodoxies. Looking at the orthodoxies of the 3 realms, although the 33 celestial court was unparalleled under the leadership of Yi Xian, with Yi Xian's absence from the celestial court, the shortcomings of the celestial court were also revealed. High-level combat power was overseeing a region. Without a sage to be, the celestial court was like a rootless duckweed. In fact, it was just an illusion that could destroy the celestial court at any time. This was undoubtedly a great crisis for the celestial court. De Yi, you're too presumptuous. Suddenly, an angry voice rang out, and a tall figure entered the Lingxiao hall. The 5-colored divine light that shook the void was majestic, and it gave people an extremely terrifying feeling. I was wondering who it was. So it's you, Kang Xian. On the celestial emperor's throne, De Yi looked directly at the newcomer. When he saw the 5-colored divine light behind Kang Xian, he frowned slightly. Get down here. Kang Xian did not waste any time. When he punched out, the 5-colored divine light shook the heavens and cracked the earth as it violently blasted towards De Yi. Do you want to die? De Yi blasted out a palm and directly slapped towards Kang Xian. Boom! There was a sky-shattering explosion and the Lingxiao hall went berserk. The two of them collided and the extremely terrifying energy shot out in all directions. The entire Lingxiao hall rumbled and shook as if it was about to collapse at any time. The sage-to-be of the sorcerer tribe is just so. Kang Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Clearly, he was injured from the collision with De Yi. However, he was laughing contemptuously and looked at De Yi with a ferocious gaze. Kang Xian, you are the first five-colored peacock since the creation of the world, and you are blessed with great fortune. This shaman does not wish to kill you. Back down. De Yi frowned. Obviously, he had held back earlier. It was not that he did not want to kill Kang Xian, but there were always some people in this world who were blessed with great fortune. Kang Xian was one of them. If he killed Kang Xian, it would definitely bring about a lot of trouble. Yi Xian is my brother. You dared to come here today. If I were to sit by and do nothing, wouldn't my brother be bitterly disappointed? Kang Xian strode forward. Five-colored divine light rumbled and surged. His eyes gradually turned blood red, and waves of obscure aura burst forth violently. If you want to die, I can fulfill your wish. De Yi's expression turned cold. He had already advised Kang Xian, but it didn't mean that he was afraid of Kang Xian. Roar! The heavens shook and the earth cracked. Under the nervous gaze of the Empyrean fairy and the rest, Kang Xian's five-colored divine light exploded in the void and transformed into the five-colored peacock's original body. A pair of sharp claws grabbed at De Yi fiercely. You are really ignorant. De Yi suddenly stood up and took a step forward. The space collapsed. His bronze body seemed to be made of Vajra glass. His two palms were like ancient divine mountains and violently slapped at Kang Xian. Bang! 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 The 33 celestial court shook and the endless void rumbled and collapsed. Although Lingxiao Hall was boundless and had the support of the array, it was unable to withstand the battle between the two. At that moment, it was crumbling inch by inch and there were already signs of collapse. Rumble. The Lingxiao Hall finally collapsed, and smoke and dust filled the sky. Following a loud boom, Kang Xian and De Yi separated with a bang, and both of them stood in the void. Puff! The five-colored peacock transformed into a human body. Kang Xian spat out mouthfuls of blood. His body was cracked like a spider web and half of his body had exploded without a trace. His miserable appearance was unbearable to look at. The five-colored divine light is indeed powerful. Unfortunately, you are only at the peak of the Grand Luo realm. If you can step into the sage-to-be, you might be able to fight with me. Unfortunately, with your current cultivation, I can easily kill you. In the sky, De Yi placed his hands behind his back and looked at Kang Xian with indifference. He gave off an overbearing feeling. Kang Xian. Suddenly, the Empyrean fairy trembled and roared. She clenched her fists and there was despair in her eyes. At that moment, the five-colored divine light on Kang Xian's body gradually dimmed and blood flowed out of his mouth. He stared at De Yi in front of him and his ferocious blood-red eyes flickered continuously. Rumble. Suddenly, Kang Xian's eyes dimmed and he fainted. His battered body fell from the sky. It was obvious that his forceful battle with De Yi had left him severely injured and on the verge of death. Master! An oriole flapped her wings and shot over, instantly transforming into a young girl. She caught Kang Xian in her arms and fled downwards without looking back. If you were not the first five-colored peacock since the creation of the world, I would definitely beat you to death today. De Yi did not pursue and allowed the oriole girl to take Kang Xian away. Repressed, heavy, speechless. Even the strongest Kang Xian was severely injured and on the verge of death. There was no one in the celestial court who could fight De Yi. This left the immortals of the celestial court in despair. Pass down my decree and announce to the three realms that if Yi Xian does not return to the celestial court, I will kill one of his subjects. De Yi struck out with his palm, causing an inspector heavenly ambassador to explode and die miserably between heaven and earth. This was a great golden immortal. De said that he would kill him, but it was obviously not just for show. He really wanted to kill one person every day until Yi Xian returned to the heavenly court. When the news of the celestial court's calamity and the invasion of a powerful enemy spread throughout the three realms, it caught the attention of all the orthodoxies in the three realms. Countless people were searching for Yi Xian's whereabouts. Longevity Mountain, Wuzhuangguan. Emperor Ziwei knelt under the ginseng fruit tree while Grand Immortal Zhen Yuan sat cross-legged in cultivation with a horsetail whisk in hand. There was no reaction from the beginning to the end. Master, you're the only one who can save the heavenly court right now. Please subdue De. Your disciple kowtows to you. Empress Myrtle Star kept kowtowing, her eyes filled with pleading. Sigh. A soft sigh came from Grand Immortal Zhen Yuan. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at Emperor Ziwei calmly. The sorcerer tribe is about to appear and the ancient demon court will reappear in the world. The calamity of heaven and earth is coming again. If I interfere with the celestial court, I'm afraid I'll be involved in this calamity. Emperor Ziwei's face turned pale when she heard Grand Immortal Zhen Yuan's words. She kept kowtowing and said in a sorrowful voice, Master, if you don't help the celestial court resolve this calamity, who else can be De Yi's opponent? I'm afraid the celestial court will be burned to the ground. Reincarnation is the law of all things. This is the unchanging law of heaven and earth. Even if I subdue De, I can only resolve the celestial court's crisis temporarily. If another sage-to-be attacks the celestial court, do I have to stay in the celestial court forever? Grand Immortal Zhen Yuan frowned. But. Chapter 659. Emperor Ziwei trembled and did not know how to respond. The despair in her eyes grew stronger. Even the grand deity Zhen Yuan was unwilling to help. Who else could save the celestial court? Could it be that Shen Gongbao had to invite the Tong Tian to the mortal world? Whoever started the trouble should end it. The celestial court will not be destroyed so easily. This great calamity of heaven and earth has just begun. You can leave now. The grand deity Zhen Yuan closed his eyes again as if he had entered into cultivation. This also made Emperor Ziwei tremble and kowtow. She could only leave the fifth manor quietly. However, what Emperor Ziwei did not know was that when he left the fifth manor, the grand deity Zhen Yuan slowly opened his eyes and looked at his back with a deep gaze. No one knew what the grand deity Zhen Yuan was thinking. Dongsheng Divine Continent. On a giant peak, Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the middle of the sea of clouds. He was cultivating. The rolling sea of clouds rose and fell with his aura. Chaotic divine light surrounded him. Qi. 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 Several streams of light swept across the sky. A burst of noise also fell into Yi Xian's ears. Fellow Taoist, is what you said true? The legendary De really killed his way to the celestial court? How can it be false? De has already killed countless immortals of the celestial court. He even announced to the three realms to wait for Yi Tiandi to appear. Is De crazy? How can Yi Tiandi be trifled with? You don't understand. De of the sorcerer tribe was a terrifying figure during the primeval age. He is also a demi-saint of the sorcerer tribe. Although Yi Tiandi is a Daluo, how can he be a match for him? Junior brother, you have only cultivated for a short time. You don't know the legend of De. Although Yi Tiandi is famous, he is not a match for him. The way I see it, Yi Tiandi must have received the news long ago, but he has already gone into hiding. After all, the sorcerer tribe's quasi-sage is a supreme figure. Although these discussions were 1,000,000 miles away, Yi Xian's cultivation was extremely terrifying. How could he not hear these discussions? This caused him to slowly open his eyes, but a gloomy light flashed through his eyes. Rumble. Heaven and earth flipped upside down and the world changed. The cultivators 500,000 kilometers away felt their vision blur. When they opened their eyes again, they found themselves in an unfamiliar place. There was a black-clothed man staring at them from up ahead. "Tell me, what happened in the celestial court?" Yi Xian asked calmly. However, when his voice fell, the cultivators' souls shook and their gazes became extremely sluggish. They slowly told Yi Xian everything that had happened in the celestial court. After dozens of breaths, Yi Xian's eyes gradually turned cold and gloomy. He slowly stood up from his cross-legged position in the sea of clouds. The cultivators instantly woke up. Who are you? What did you do to us?" Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not respond to the cultivators' trembling questions. At this moment, Yi Xian's lips moved slightly. He saw Neza and Yi Yaoyue shooting toward Yi Xian from a mountain peak in the distance. "Brother, who are they?" Yi Yaoyue asked in bewilderment. She sized them up in confusion. Neza, on the other hand, sensed that Yi Xian's aura was not right. His heart trembled and he knew that something big must have happened. "Return to the celestial court," Yi Xian said softly. He took a step forward and returned to the 33rd celestial court. Neza pulled Yi Yaoyue and hurriedly followed after Yi Xian. The cultivators were left stunned and did not recover from their shock for a long time. After 10,000 kilometers of wind, thunder, and fire, they would arrive at the 33rd celestial court. However, when Yi Xian stood in front of the southern heavenly gate, his expression became increasingly gloomy. The southern heavenly gate no longer existed. All that was left was a pile of ruins. It was extremely dilapidated. "You've really lived long enough, haven't you?" Yi Xian smiled. His smile was extremely warm and contained a touch of spring wind and rain. However, when Neza and Yi Yaoyue saw his smile, they couldn't help but shiver. A sense of extreme terror rose in their hearts. Yi Xian strolled forward, leaving behind a footprint with each step. He stepped through the southern heavenly gate and headed toward the bullfighting palace. However, all he saw along the way were large numbers of floating corpses. Who knew how many immortals had died tragically in the celestial court? In the bullfighting palace, De Yi sat on the celestial emperor's throne and bound the immortals of the celestial court with immortal binding ropes. Even the Empyrean fairy, a disciple of the sage, was no exception. The bullfighting palace was vast and boundless, but the ground was already soaked with blood and floating corpses. Hundreds of immortals lay strewn across the floor. Clearly, many immortals had died at De Yi's hands in the past year. Just as he'd said, for every day Yi Xian didn't return, he'd kill one immortal, until the entire celestial court was destroyed. The square dragon seal, the symbol of the celestial emperor. De Yi toyed with it in his hand. With a clang, he casually tossed it to the ground. "The hour has passed. Time to kill one more." De Yi suddenly smiled and looked at the immortals of the celestial court. When he saw Shingongbao, a vicious glint flashed through his eyes. "De Yi, do you dare to kill a disciple of the Tongtian?" The Empyrean fairy's expression changed and she was yelling at De Yi. Killing the other immortals was one thing, but Shingongbao was the representative of the Jia sect in the celestial court. He was also Yi Xian's confidant. If De Yi killed Shingongbao, how could she explain it to Yi Xian? Why wouldn't I dare to kill a mere disciple of the Jia sect? As a quasi-saint of the shaman race, he had the 12 ancient shamans behind him. Perhaps others were afraid of the Grand Master of Heaven, but he, De Yi, wasn't afraid in the slightest. As long as it was someone by Yi Xian's side, he would kill them all. "De Yi, kill me if you want. Even if I become a malicious spirit, I'll curse you for all eternity." Shingongbao roared. "You won't have the chance to become a malicious spirit, because your soul will be destroyed." De Yi smiled coldly. His palms and fingers were glowing, as if he'd kill Shingongbao on the spot in the next moment. "You've killed so many people of the celestial court. I have to say, you've got guts." Suddenly, at this critical moment, a calm voice came from outside the bullfighting palace, accompanied by light footsteps. This made De stunned. The light in his palms and fingers dissipated, and he looked up at the person who came. Tap, tap, tap. Yi Xian strolled into the bullfighting palace. With every step he took, the sound of his footsteps could be heard in the bullfighting palace. Although he didn't reveal any power around him, when he appeared in the bullfighting palace, it was as if he'd turned into the brightest star in the world. The Celestial Emperor. Yi Xian. Shen Gongbao said excitedly. The Empyrean fairy gritted her teeth, and her eyes were misty. The other immortals shouted the name of the Celestial Emperor, breaking the heavy and oppressive atmosphere in the bullfighting palace. On the Celestial Emperor's throne, De smiled and looked at Yi Xian from head to toe. Then, he nodded slowly and said, "I thought you wouldn't dare to appear, and was planning to destroy your celestial court. It seems that you still have some guts to appear in front of me for your celestial court." Chapter 660. Yi Xian calmly watched as De sat on his throne. A trace of a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "I have to say that you are very brave to come to the celestial court alone. But have you ever thought that you might die in the celestial court?" Yi Xian's voice was warm and gentle, and it even had the feeling of spring wind and rain. No one could see any killing intent in his voice. Ha! De laughed maniacally as though he had heard the funniest joke. After 3 breaths, the smile on his face disappeared and his expression turned cold. He stared at Yi Xian and said, "Do you think you can kill me? Are you worthy?" Rumble. Sorcery light shot out in all directions and the bullfighting palace shook. De stood up from his throne and his eyes were spinning. It was as though the entire world was being destroyed in his eyes. "Come, let me see what you are capable of." Yi Xian was still smiling. However, his smile was extremely strange. He even crooked his finger at De. Die! His palm flipped the sky, suppressing mountains and rivers. De's expression was cold as he slapped his palm towards Yi Xian, instantly shattering the bullfighting palace. A large palm that covered the sky smashed down towards Yi Xian with boundless force. Buzz! Invulnerable and indestructible. Yi Xian's smile disappeared. His arm was moving and his palm was forming a fist. Boundless darkness covered the 33 layers of the celestial court. When he punched out, the chaotic divine light went straight for De. Bang! Heaven and earth exploded and the void collapsed. When the two of them clashed, the entire bullfighting palace turned into ashes. However, it was not over yet. Yi Xian and De soared into the sky. When their fists and palms collided, the 33 layers of the celestial court shook violently. Cracks appeared in the space between heaven and earth. Rumble. Their silhouettes intersected, causing the heavens to explode. The endless celestial clouds turned into water vapor, and the two of them were also completely separated at this moment. Yi Xian, be careful. The Empyrean fairy said worriedly from afar. Apparently, De was a sage-to-be of the sorcerer tribe. Although Yi Xian had returned after 30,000 years, he would not be a match for De unless he became a sage-to-be. This made the Empyrean fairy extremely worried. The strength of a corpse. In the sky, Yi Xian put his hands behind his back and looked at De with a deep gaze. At this moment, De narrowed his eyes and sneered. However, no one noticed the solemn look in his eyes. Because when the two of them exchanged blows, De was surprised to find that his opponent's aura was extremely strange. His opponent's cultivation level seemed to be on par with his. It seems that I have underestimated you. With your cultivation base, you are indeed qualified to be my opponent. De nodded slowly. Ha! Yi Xian smiled, but his smile was extremely strange. He looked at De as if he was looking at a dead man. You are wrong. In my eyes, you are not qualified to be my opponent. Yi Xian said softly. However, when De Yi heard this, his face turned cold instantly. You are very arrogant. Unfortunately, you will pay for your arrogance. Rumble. The sorcerer light Tong Tian, heaven annihilating earth. Vast blood chi shot up into the sky. De Yi's body was glowing. This was the sorcerer tribe's divine light, and it was also a light that could not be penetrated by anything. This meant that he was going to attack with all his might and directly kill Yi Xian between heaven and earth. Fight! His roar shattered mountains and rivers, and strong winds blew between heaven and earth. De Yi took a step forward, and the sky under his feet shook violently. Even the space between heaven and earth was slightly distorted. When he appeared again, a pair of flesh palms with the power to destroy heaven and earth slammed down on Yi Xian. Chi! Suddenly, Yi Xian did not fight De Yi head-on. Instead, he turned into a stream of light and shot towards the sky. This made De Yi laugh coldly, and he let out an earth-shattering roar. You want to escape? Where can you escape to? De Yi's fighting spirit shot up into the sky, and sorcerer light rippled in all directions. He violently chased after Yi Xian, and the two of them instantly disappeared from the 33rd heaven of the celestial court. Quick! Quick! Take out the heaven mirror. Looking at the two of them chasing after each other, the Empyrean fairy trembled. The heaven mirror celestial official did not dare to delay and quickly took out the heaven mirror. As the celestial art was inserted into the heaven mirror, the scene of the battle between Yi Xian and De Yi appeared again. Outside the 33rd heaven, the boundless sea of stars was vast and boundless. The great stars rumbled and rotated according to an unchanging law since time immemorial. It was unknown how many meteorites and stars were floating in outer space. Two figures were chasing and fleeing in the luminous starry sky. Yi Xian, you can't escape. De Yi roared ferociously, and his palms and fingers continuously attacked Yi Xian with great sorcerer arts. The murderous aura around him was extremely frightening. Suddenly, Yi Xian's fleeing figure stopped, and he stood in the starry sky. He looked back at De Yi, and a gloomy and ferocious murderous intent quietly flashed across his eyes. It is said that the sorcerer tribe only has brute courage, and it seems that this is true. You dare to quarrel with me with the strength of a corpse? I'll send you on your way today. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. He looked like he was escaping, but in fact, he just wanted to change the battlefield. The battle between the sage-to-be was too terrifying. If he fully activated the 33rd heaven of the celestial court, he would definitely be burned to the ground, and this was not the result he wanted to see. You're just an ant, and you're just putting on airs. Today, I'll kill you in the sky and restore the name of the sorcerer tribe. De Yi roared violently. The sorcerer tribe's physical body was indestructible. He was like an unsheathed heavenly sword, and with a violent and boundless power, he attacked Yi Xian. Sun-shooting incantation. De Yi swung his palms in the starry sky, and rays of golden light condensed in the starry sky, turning into thousands of sharp arrows that shot towards Yi Xian. Bang bang bang. The vast sea of stars was churning violently, and meteorites were exploding. De Yi was a sage-to-be of the sorcerer tribe, and his cultivation was too terrifying. The art of killing that he condensed was earth-shattering. Child's play. Yi Xian smiled contemptuously, and a pair of sword fingers cut through the sea of stars. Chaotic divine light rose slightly, and also condensed into thousands of sword radiances that shot towards De Yi. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Heaven and earth were in chaos, and the sea of stars was shattered. When the two's art of killing surged in the starry sky, a scene of destruction was presented. The stars were exploding, and the sea of stars was churning. Shattered meteorites fell from the sky, and the terrifying power was too dazzling. Die! Suddenly, De Yi appeared in front of Yi Xian, and when he punched out, he aimed for Yi Xian's heart. The destructive black light flickered on his fist, as if he was going to kill Yi Xian in the next moment. An extremely strange thing happened. Yi Xian did not dodge, and let De Yi's fist hit his heart. This made De Yi's expression change slightly, and he had an extremely bad feeling. Bang! There was an explosion, and the starry sky was in chaos. Yi Xian did not move, and De Yi's fist radiance could not move an inch. His attack landed on Yi Xian's chest and scathed. Chapter 661. Silence, silence, absolute silence. De Yi's eyes froze, and his mind trembled. When he raised his head to look at Yi Xian, he saw Yi Xian grinning at him. However, a great fear of life and death abruptly arose from the bottom of his heart. Retreat! Without any hesitation or daring to stop, De Yi was about to leave Yi Xian's side. However, before he could do anything, Yi Xian had already raised his jade-like palm and slapped it down towards him under his terrified gaze. Bang! As if the 9 heavens were hanging upside down, as if a divine mountain was falling from the sky, Yi Xian's palm landed on De Yi's face. With a loud explosion, half of De Yi's face crumbled and several bloody teeth spilled out. De Yi was sent flying like a rubber ball. Which blood splattered across the starry sky as De Yi's body smashed through meteorites until he was 1,000,000 miles away. De Yi's body gradually came to a stop. You're really weak. Yi Xian swept the dust off his chest. Perhaps there was no dust at all, but his posture was too casual. It was as if De Yi's attack had merely tickled him. Perhaps some people would ask why De Yi, a quasi-saint of the witch race, was unable to injure Yi Xian with his peerless physical body. In fact, the reason was very simple. Yi Xian walked the path of using strength to prove his Tao. In the past, he hadn't been able to manifest the might of the path of using strength to prove his Tao, but when he stepped into the half-step quasi-saint realm, the terror of using strength to prove his Tao began to appear. Moreover, don't forget that although Yi Xian's great Luo immortal body was only a step away from completion, his physical body was completely comparable to the powerful physical body of the great Yi Shaman clan. With the support of his undying true spirit, he was naturally able to withstand De Yi's terrifying attack. Of course, Yi Xian seemed to have casually blocked De Yi's attack, but in fact, he had mobilized all his cultivation. But Yi Xian not only wanted to defeat De Yi in terms of cultivation, he also wanted to inflict the most terrifying mental torture on De Yi. This was his goal. Rumble. The starry sky exploded and De Yi shot back. Half of his face was rapidly recovering. This also proved that the witch race's physical body was indeed terrifying. No, impossible, how can your physical body be so strong? De Yi let out a low roar. He simply couldn't believe what he'd encountered. His gaze towards Yi Xian was filled with astonishment. It was no wonder that De Yi was behaving this way. There were 2 things that he was most proud of. One was his indestructible body of the sorcerer tribe, and the other was his 9 sun-shooting arrows. These were also his greatest trump cards. But today, the witch clan's physical body that he was so proud of was injured by Yi Xian. How could he accept this? Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't respond to De Yi's furious roar. The only thing that greeted him was Yi Xian's cruel and sinister smile, as well as that terrifying attack that could destroy mountains and rivers. Rumble. Rumble. Yi Xian's forehead glowed. The undying true spirit rotated in his sea of consciousness. The immortal body of the great all-embracing heaven burst out with chaotic divine light under the support of the undying true spirit. A power that could crush all things revolved around Yi Xian. When he took a step forward, he tore through the starry sky and appeared in front of De Yi. Die! Who could defeat a punch that could turn the world upside down? Yi Xian roared cruelly. He swung the great demonic fist, as if he was swinging the entire luminous sky. It smashed toward De Yi with destructive power. You're courting death. Looking at Yi Xian actually using the strength of his physical body to suppress him, this was simply a great humiliation for De Yi. This also caused him to roar in anger as he similarly swung his fists towards Yi Xian. De did not believe that his indestructible witch race physical body could not even compare to an immortal. Bang! 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 Stars exploded one after another. The boundless sea of stars was overturned. Their fists collided repeatedly, but an extremely shocking thing happened. Blood, blood. Bright and beautiful blood flowed out of De Yi's fists. As his fists collided with Yi Xian's, his fists cracked continuously. Large amounts of blood soaked his fists, and one could faintly see his pale finger bones. It was an extremely shocking sight. Impossible, impossible. Since when has the physical body of a witch race lost to an immortal? What kind of technique are you cultivating? De Yi trembled and roared. Under Yi Xian's terrifying attacks, he retreated step by step. His fists were a bloody mess. He could no longer continue to exchange blows with Yi Xian. Instead, he kept retreating, barely resisting the terrifying attacks from Yi Xian's fists. Rumble. Suddenly, there was an explosion in the luminous starry sky. Yi Xian's chaotic divine light was extremely dazzling. His fists seemed to be able to shake the heavens and earth as he mercilessly and viciously attacked De Yi. Crack. The sound of bones cracking could be heard. De Yi's fists crumbled inch by inch. His arms were twisted to the extreme. In the face of Yi Xian's powerful fists, he could not withstand it. Yi Xian's fist landed on his chest and a terrifying bloody hole appeared. Ugh! De Yi groaned as Yi Xian's fist pierced through his chest. However, this was not the end. What happened next made De Yi unable to extricate himself from the pain and humiliation. Rumble. Yi Xian's palms were like giant hands that could destroy mountains and rivers. They could even destroy the starry sky. He stretched out his palms and fingers and grabbed onto De Yi's arms. A cruel and ferocious smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. Ah! Blood splattered across the starry sky and a blood-curdling scream could be heard. Yi Xian's palms and fingers glowed and an extremely terrifying power appeared on his palms. He actually tore De Yi's arms off. Bright red blood continued to spurt out from De Yi's severed arms. De Yi's blood-curdling screams were even more terrifying. You are really a piece of trash. Yi Xian was cruel and malevolent. He casually threw De Yi's arm out, and as he swung his right fist, he continuously smashed it towards De Yi's head. The loud rumbling sound was even more deafening, and the tragic scene was simply impossible to look straight at. Bang bang bang. 1 punch, 2 punches, 3 punches, Yi Xian's fists were like stars that filled the sky. They were raining down on De Yi. De Yi's head kept shriveling and it was impossible to see his original facial features. When this scene appeared in the divine mirror, the immortals and Empyrean fairy in the 33rd layer of the celestial court were silent. They only looked at Yi Xian with great respect in their eyes. Strong, too strong, so strong that it made them despair. This was not only what the Empyrean fairy felt, but also what the immortals of the celestial court felt. No one expected that after 30,000 years, when Yi Xian reappeared, he would be so terrifying. An indescribable excitement grew in the hearts of the immortals. Everyone's eyes were filled with restlessness. They seemed to see the future of the celestial court. Under Yi Xian's leadership, each of them would reach the peak. The boundless celestial emperor. One of the immortals roared in excitement. This seemed to have a chain effect. The immortals of the celestial court also roared in agreement, causing the entire 33rd layer of the celestial court to rumble. Chapter 662. The luminous starry sky was boundless. His fist radiance filled the sky, and which blood splattered everywhere. De Yi was in a miserable state. His arms had been broken by Yi Xian, and his indestructible body of a witch was badly damaged. The tragic scene was too horrifying. Bang! The starry sky exploded and the sea of stars exploded. Yi Xian punched out, and De Yi's broken body was blasted 1,000,000 miles away. A large amount of shaman blood soaked his body, making it impossible to see his original appearance. The starry sky was turbulent, and the stars were stagnant. Wisps of chaotic divine light circled around Yi Xian, illuminating him and making him look majestic. He had the power to suppress heaven and earth. In the depths of the starry sky, De Yi's body was badly damaged. He seemed to have fainted and was floating in the depths of the starry sky. However, an obscure aura gushed out from his body, and an extremely strange thing happened. Buzz! The starry sky rippled, and De Yi's broken body was recovering rapidly. Wisps of mysterious waves bloomed around him, and he sat cross-legged in the starry sky, chanting mysterious witchcraft. Rumble! The chanting of sutras in the heavens appeared, and wisps of mysterious symbols fell on De Yi's head. A beam of Tongtian witchcraft light covered him completely, and the chanting in the boundless starry sky became louder and louder. At this moment, Yi Xian frowned, and a serious look flashed across his eyes. The chaotic divine light around him rose to its peak. Apparently, Yi Xian was also taking De Yi's strange transformation seriously. From the beginning, Yi Xian had never underestimated De Yi. This was because Yi Xian knew that the witch race was superior to the immortals in the same realm, and their bodies were even more terrifying. However, one should not forget that De Yi's strongest trump card was not his body, but his archery skills. His unparalleled archery skills could shoot through the sun, moon, and stars. In the past, he had used his archery skills to kill the 9 ancient golden crows. Rumble! The light of Tongtian vanished, and De Yi walked out of the sea of stars. His body, which had been badly damaged by Yi Xian, was not injured at all. Yi Xian, I have to admit that you are indeed very strong. You are so strong that even the physical bodies of us shamans are no match for you. De Yi strolled through the starry sky. His face was calm, and he no longer looked as fierce as before. Instead, there was a touch of gentleness. The golden hair that fell behind his head was shining brightly, and he looked like a god between heaven and earth. Unfortunately, even though you're powerful enough to terrify me, you're still going to die by my hands today. This is your destiny. De Yi said calmly. There was no anger or humiliation like before, nor was there a ferocious roar. It was as if he was talking about something very casual, and his face was radiant with confidence. Come. De Yi murmured softly. Time and space in the world froze slightly. A ripple appeared in front of him, and a divine light quietly appeared. Although this light was not dazzling, it caused the surrounding starry sky to stagnate. The bow was the heaven-shaking divine bow, and the arrow was the sun-shooting divine arrow. The bow looked like it was made of rotten wood, and there were pictures of mountains, rivers, birds, and beasts engraved on it. The arrow looked like it was made of ordinary iron, and there were pictures of the sun, moon, and stars engraved on it. The bow and arrow shocked the ancients and dazzled the contemporaries. This was De Yi's lifelong treasure, and it was also a great weapon of destruction. What was a great weapon of destruction? A great weapon of destruction killed all living things. There was nothing it could not destroy, and there was nothing it could not destroy. However, all living things that encountered a great weapon of destruction would vanish into thin air and cease to exist in the world. This was a great weapon of destruction. According to the legends of the 3 realms, the strongest thing about the shaman tribe was their physical bodies. In fact, this saying was both true and false, and it also caused people to overlook the most terrifying thing about the shaman tribe. The shaman tribe's physical bodies were indeed very strong, and they were said to be the best in the 3 realms. The physical bodies of the 12 ancient shamans were unimaginably strong, as the shaman tribe was formed from Pangu's blood essence, so their physical bodies were naturally very strong. However, the most terrifying thing about the shaman tribe was not their physical bodies, but their innate magical powers. This was their strongest foundation, and it was also something that had been overlooked. Just like the 12 ancient shamans. Dijiang, ancient shaman of space speed. Gomang, ancient shaman of eastern wood. Zhu Rong, ancient shaman of fire. Gonggang, ancient shaman of northern water. Zhu Jiuyin, ancient shaman of time. These were the unique innate magical powers of the shaman tribe. Of course, not every shaman tribe member had innate magical powers, but any shaman tribe member who had innate magical powers were extremely terrifying figures. De Yi's innate divine ability was this bow and arrow. This bow and arrow were also his lifelong supreme treasures. This was his strongest trump card. At this moment, the bow and arrow had reappeared in the world. At this moment, De Yi was in his strongest state, and he was very confident that it would be easy to kill Yi Xian. In the past, he had relied on the bow and arrow to shoot down the 9 ancient golden crows, and he had also relied on the bow and arrow to escape from Di Jun's pursuit. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the bow and arrow were. At this moment, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and his indestructible true spirit was slightly throbbing. An extremely heavy feeling pressed on his soul, and he felt a sense of death approaching. Yi Xian trusted his intuition, and he had once possessed the bow and arrow. No one knew better than him how terrifying the bow and arrow were. In fact, their cultivations were on par. Yi Xian was a half-step sage to be, and De Yi was comparable to a sage to be who had severed one corpse. In terms of cultivation, they were on par. However, De Yi had been severely injured by Yi Xian, and this was because his physical body was no match for Yi Xian's, so he did not use the bow and arrow. At this moment, with the bow and arrow in hand, De Yi was completely fearless, because this was his strongest state. He also believed that Yi Xian would be killed by his sun-shooting divine arrow. From the beginning to the end, Yi Xian did not underestimate De Yi, because Yi Xian knew that De Yi, with the bow and arrow in hand, was his real enemy. Let me see how powerful you are. The chaotic divine light rumbled, and the starry sky roared violently. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and his voice echoed in the boundless starry sky, without any fear. I'll send you on your way. De Yi roared, and the luminous starry sky rumbled, and the punishment of heaven and earth trembled violently. The rotten wooden bow was drawn, and the sun-shooting divine arrow was placed on the bowstring. The Tongtian's earth-shaking golden light completely covered him. Die! In the Tongtian's divine light, De Yi roared, and the bowstring was fully drawn. The sun-shooting divine arrow turned into a bright golden light, and with a sky-splitting explosion, the sun-shooting divine arrow shot toward Yi Xian. Chi! Like the first ray of light at dawn, and like the chaotic divine thunder that pierced through heaven and earth, this arrow directly caused the luminous starry sky to stagnate, and even disturbed the laws of time and space, showing the power to destroy heaven and earth. Cloudy Heaven Technique. The starry sky exploded, and the roar shattered the stars. Yi Xian's hair flew wildly, and his hands conjured the immortal celestial art, and directly displayed the defensive technique that he had cultivated. Rumble. The chaotic divine light turned into a golden shield that covered him. The thick light was indestructible, and in the face of the destructive power of the sun-shooting divine arrow, Yi Xian did not dare to be careless. Chapter 663. Bang! 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 The sun-shooting divine arrow was too resplendent and terrifying. Large stars exploded one after another, and the boundless sea of stars was torn apart for millions of miles. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of Yi Xian. Crack! With a crisp crack, Yi Xian's cloudy heaven art crumbled inch by inch. The sun-slaying divine arrow buzzed and shattered the cloudy heaven art in the blink of an eye. The dazzling tip of the arrow pierced toward Yi Xian's heart. Bzzz. Yi Xian grimaced and frantically retreated, but the sun-slaying divine arrow seemed to have locked onto him, making it impossible for him to dodge. Swoosh! An extremely terrifying thing happened. The sun-shooting divine arrow instantly pierced through Yi Xian's heart. A thick stream of blood spurted out from his heart, causing Yi Xian to let out a muffled groan. Terrifying, too terrifying. Yi Xian's origin immortal body was extremely powerful, and although it had yet to reach grand completion, his physical body was still frightening. But now, the sun-slaying divine arrow had pierced through his heart, severely wounding Yi Xian. The sun-slaying divine arrow returns only when it sees blood. Today, you will die without question. Rumble. The sun-slaying divine arrow silently appeared in Great Yi's hand as he roared at Yi Xian. His eyes were filled with chilling killing intent as he looked at Yi Xian. Second arrow, Sun Chaser. Great Yi savagely roared. He would not give Yi Xian any time to catch his breath. He drew the bowstring again, and the sun-slaying divine arrow exploded with divine light. Luminous starry sky rumbled as he fired the second arrow. Great Demon Fist. Yi Xian's eyes were bloodshot. Although blood was still gushing out of his heart, boundless demon chi was rising around him, and terrifying ripples of energy were unleashed from his body. Rumble. The two demonic fists were like giant hammers, bringing with them the power to destroy the world as they smashed down on the sun-shooting god arrow. However, with two explosive sounds, Yi Xian's fists were a bloody mess. He was sent flying back again. It's useless. One bow and one arrow can destroy everything. Even if your physical body surpasses mine, so what? Today, you will die under the divine sun-shot arrow. De Yi laughed maniacally, as if he was venting the humiliation he had suffered at the hands of Yi Xian. He pulled the bowstring and was about to shoot the third arrow. Tribulation. Yi Xian let out a low growl as he performed the art of immortality with both hands. His mangled fists were restored to their original state, and the large hole in his chest was rapidly recovering. However, his face was still slightly pale, and it was obvious that his vitality had been damaged by the sun-shot divine arrow. The 9 arrows of the shooting sun can destroy the heavens and earth. That was only the first 2 arrows. The remaining 7 are more than enough to take your life. Yi roared. His eyes turned red. His desire to kill Yi Xian had been deeply rooted in his heart. Interesting. Suddenly, Yi Xian gave a strange smile. A wisp of fog quietly grew around him. A dark light flashed across his eyes, causing the starry sky to freeze slightly. Open. Looking at the strange smile on Yi Xian's face, Yi's heart suddenly sank. It was as if he felt that something bad was about to happen. This made him let out a loud roar and quickly pulled the bowstring. It was obvious that he was about to shoot the third arrow. Do you think you're the only one with a weapon? Yi Xian's voice was strange and cold. It was also when Yi Xian finished speaking that an extremely strange and terrifying thing happened. Dong, dong, dong. Like the beating of a war drum, like the explosion of a chaotic thunder, a little darkness grew in the starry sky. In an instant, it caused the boundless sea of stars to stagnate and the large stars to stop moving. Darkness, endless darkness. This darkness gradually spread and completely covered the starry sky. Only the shadow of a blood-red moon grew in the darkness, and a little bit of cold light flashed faintly. Rumble. The 3-inch halberd's body was pitch black and ancient patterns were engraved on it. There were also obscure and indecipherable words carved on the halberd's body. The halberd's tip was releasing an ancient killing aura. At this moment, it was bobbing up and down in the starry sky. The heaven-destroying halberd, the #1 killing weapon of all time. It was suspected to be an item that did not belong to the 3 realms. This halberd had an unfathomable and terrifying power. It was also Yi Xian's true weapon. Halberd, come. In the endless darkness, Yi Xian's back was straight. As he roared, the 3-inch halberd expanded in the wind until it became a 3-foot-long halberd that fell into Yi Xian's hand. Whoosh whoosh. When the heaven-destroying halberd was in Yi Xian's hand, an extremely shocking scene appeared. In the endless darkness of the starry sky, there was the sound of crashing waves. The shadow of a blood-red river appeared and the cries of billions of dead souls could be heard from the blood-red river. The darkness was endless and the sea of blood was overflowing. Yi Xian held the halberd in his hand and the sea of blood behind him was too strange. The heaven-destroying halberd in his hand seemed to be different from before. A thick blood-red light flashed on the halberd and there was a buzzing sound coming from the halberd. This scene stunned De Yi. The bow and arrow in his hand trembled slightly at this moment. This was because when the heaven-destroying halberd appeared, De Yi's soul felt like it was being torn apart. There was also a great terror of life and death that invaded his mind. This is... De Yi stuttered as he stared at the heaven-destroying halberd in Yi Xian's hand. There was a tinge of fear in his eyes because the weapon in Yi Xian's hand was making his bow and arrow cry out. Suppression, natural suppression. This was the natural suppression of weapons. It was like a lamb meeting a lion. The lamb would naturally feel fear in its heart. At this moment, De Yi could completely feel the fear in his bow and arrow. This fear was also transmitted to his mind. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Yi Xian held the halberd and walked in the starry sky. With every step he took, the heaven-destroying halberd hummed. Streaks of murderous aura grew and covered Yi Xian completely. Die! Facing Yi Xian's strange state, De Yi roared with a trembling voice. In the end, he shot out a third arrow. The golden light of the sun shooting divine arrow soared as it shot towards Yi Xian with a destructive might. Buzz! Yi Xian swung the heaven-destroying halberd in his hand. It was as if he was swinging the entire starry sky and causing the stars to deviate from their original trajectories. The heaven-destroying halberd did not show its power. There was only a dark murderous aura that bloomed as it smashed towards the sun-slaying divine arrow. Clang! The starry sky exploded and the sea of stars was annihilated. The stars were turned into ashes in the boundless tremors. However, this was not the scariest thing. The scariest thing was that the sun-slaying divine arrow, which could destroy anything, was sent flying by the heaven-destroying halberd. There were even cracks on the sun-slaying divine arrow. Impossible! Such a scene directly caused De Yi to roar in horror. He even took a few steps back as he looked at Yi Xian with an extremely panicked expression. As far as De Yi knew, his bow and arrow could destroy heaven and earth. Even though Di Jun had severely injured him, he had escaped because of his fear of De Yi's bow and arrow. However, today, the legend of his bow and arrow was broken. The treasure that he was most proud of was no match for the heaven-destroying halberd. This made De Yi extremely depressed. Chapter 664. You're really a piece of trash. Emotionless and cold, Yi Xian's voice reverberated through Tai Hao Star. Wielding his heaven's destruction halberd, he walked towards De Yi slowly, ignoring the bow and arrow in his hands. I don't believe it. De Yi roared out crazily. His eyes were bloodshot. He pulled the bowstring once more and shot out the fourth arrow. Bam! Swinging the halberd, the starry sky was destroyed. The shooting sun god arrow was smashed out once more. The body of the arrow was cracking and the bright light was dimming. Shing shing shing. De Yi seemed to have entered a state of madness. He pulled the bowstring continuously and shot towards Yi Xian. The shooting sun god arrow was releasing its last bit of power, as though it was evolving. The fifth arrow, the sixth arrow, the seventh arrow, the eighth arrow, the shooting sun god 8 arrows were shot out together. The arrow light that pierced through the starry sky was so bright that it destroyed millions of miles of the starry sky. However, the thing that scared him the most was that Yi Xian was safe and sound even after shooting out 8 arrows. It was as though the halberd was a natural counter to the bow and arrow, as they were all smashed out by it. How boring. You can go and die now. Yi Xian took a step forward. Swinging the heaven's destruction halberd, an infinite amount of dark light shone out. The cold body of the halberd was releasing a killing light that had never been seen before, as it smashed towards De Yi's sky spirit. Clang! De Yi hurriedly took up the sky-shaking god bow to block. Following a loud boom, a stalemate scene appeared. Yi Xian held the halberd with one hand and was pressing down on the sky-shaking god bow. De Yi held the bow with both hands and was trying his best to block the heaven's destruction halberd. Crack, 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 De Yi's face was flushed red as large amounts of sweat appeared on his forehead. However, there was a look of panic in his eyes. This was because the sky-shaking god bow in his hands was showing signs of cracking. It was as though it wouldn't take long for it to break under the heaven's destruction halberd. Open! De Yi roared in anger as the heaven-shaking divine bow buzzed violently. An extremely terrifying force burst out from the heaven-shaking divine bow, causing Yi Xian to be sent flying. Shooting Sun's 9 arrows. De Yi was panting heavily. Of madness. Of blood of his body. He was. Of the bow and arrow. This 9th arrow was De Yi's strongest arrow. Back then, he had used the 9th arrow to escape from Di Jun's hands. However, he never thought that he would use the 9th arrow again today. He also didn't think that Yi Xian would force him to such an extent. Boom! Of the sky shaking god of the sky of the sky of god bow. Of the rumble. Of the sons of the son's son of the ofs of the of. You're still far from it. Yi Xian roared in the boundless darkness. His heaven-destroying halberd gave off a boundless killing light. It turned into a dot of black light and flew towards the shooting sun's divine arrow. Boom! The two terrifying forces collided. Space within 1,000 miles was turned into a vacuum. No one could see the outcome of this battle. 33rd Heaven of the Celestial Court. The divine mirror was dim. It could not reflect the outcome of this battle. The Empyrean Fairy and the Immortals of the Celestial Court watched anxiously. Everyone was worried. After several dozen breaths of time, the image in the heaven mirror finally became clear again. However, when the image appeared in the mirror, the Empyrean Maiden and the Immortals of the Heavenly Court were stunned. Everyone's eyes were burning with excitement. Outside of the 33rd heaven, in the luminous starry sky, the heaven-destroying halberd was floating in space. Blood-red light rippled in all directions. Yi Xian stood on top of the halberd. A jade-like palm was placed on De Yi's neck. The heaven-shaking divine bow broke into two, and the sun-shooting divine arrow cracked inch by inch. The bow and arrow were dim, and mouthfuls of blood continuously flowed out from the corners of De Yi's mouth. At this moment, he was glaring at Yi Xian. Tell me, what is that in your hand? De Yi roared. Even though he was in the hands of Yi Xian, he could not understand how his bow and arrow could be defeated by Yi Xian's weapon. A dead man has no right to know the answer. Yi Xian said calmly. His 5 fingers tightened. A terrifying force was exerted on De Yi's neck. De Yi's face turned purple. It was as if he was going to be crushed to death by Yi Xian. You can't kill me, no one can kill me. De Yi did not beg for mercy. As a grand shaman, his dignity did not allow him to bow down to Yi Xian. Looking at Yi Xian, his eyes were bloodshot. This caused Yi Xian to frown. He had a bad feeling about this. Retreat. Without any hesitation or pause, Yi Xian instantly let go of De Yi and explosively retreated backwards. However, it was also at this moment that De Yi laughed maniacally as strands of bloody light shot out from his body. Yi Xian. You forced me to do this. You forced me to do this. De Yi howled madly. Something terrifying happened. His flesh fell off inch by inch as a set of pale white bones appeared. The bones strangely transformed into a white longbow. His flesh and blood gathered together to form a blood-red arrow. With bones as the bow and flesh as the arrow, this is the 10th arrow that I have comprehended over the years. Yi Xian, go to hell. The witch tribe did not have primordial spirits. Their physical bodies were their foundation. De Yi had sacrificed himself to form the final arrow. The power of the arrow was comparable to a demi-saint who had slain 2 demi-saints. Even if Yi Xian had the heaven-destroying halberd in his hands, he would be severely injured if he did not die. Of course, De Yi had destroyed his physical body. All that was left was his head. Even if he could survive, his cultivation base would drop to that of a demi-saint. He would be no different from an ordinary witch tribe member. This was the price to pay for the 10th arrow. Go to hell. Although De Yi only had 1 head left, he was still roaring at Yi Xian. The white bone longbow was pulled open at an extremely fast speed, and the flesh arrow was knocked on the bowstring. A power that could annihilate the heavens and earth bloomed from the bow and arrow. Rumble. The 10th arrow was shot. The terrifying blood-red light destroyed the entire starry sky. The bow and arrow disappeared. Only the arrow radiance that pierced through the heavens and earth was heading towards Yi Xian. Damn it! Yi Xian's expression greatly changed as the heavenly extermination halberd crazily swayed in his hand. Yi Xian could completely feel that even if he had the heavenly extermination halberd in his hand, he definitely wouldn't be able to block this arrow. This was because this arrow had already surpassed his current cultivation. Unless he could truly step into the quasi-saint realm, he would definitely suffer an unimaginable heavy injury from this arrow. Chapter 665. Rumble. The arrow radiance lit up the sky and destroyed everything. It destroyed Yi Xian. De Yi, who was left with only his head, laughed maniacally. He believed that Yi Xian would definitely die. Suddenly, time seemed to stop and space seemed to freeze. The entire luminous star galaxy was silent. The destructive arrow radiance was gradually dissipating and a little darkness grew in the arrow radiance. De Yi's wild laughter came to an abrupt halt. His eyes were lifeless as he looked in Yi Xian's direction. However, the next scene seemed to have caused his soul to leave his body. Boundless fear arose in his heart. Run! Without any hesitation, De Yi did not dare to stop. Although he was left with only his head, he fled towards the lower worlds. In an instant, he disappeared from the luminous star galaxy. Buzz! The starry sky shook and ripples appeared. Yi Xian struggled to walk out of the destructive arrow radiance. However, every step he took was extremely taxing. The heavens halberd was releasing a mysterious fog that covered him and resisted the destructive power of the destructive arrow radiance. After a full 2 hours, Yi Xian finally walked out of the annihilation arrow light. The heaven-punishing halberd buzzed, and with a shake of the halberd, the annihilation arrow light completely dissipated. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes were gloomy. His eyes shone through the heaven, earth and man realms and he was looking for traces of De Yi's escape. After 2 hours, De Yi was nowhere to be found. Yi Xian could not find any trace of him either. Just now, Yi Xian felt the threat of death. However, when he was about to be destroyed by the destructive arrow radiance, the undying real spirit in his sea of consciousness buzzed violently. This caused the heavens halberd to undergo a miraculous change. A mysterious fog spread out from the heavens halberd and blocked the destructive arrow radiance. This prevented Yi Xian from being severely injured. However, it was also this delay that allowed De Yi to escape towards the lower worlds. No one has ever escaped from the people I want to kill. Yi Xian's eyes were cold and his voice was cruel. He took a step forward and returned to the 33rd heaven of the celestial court. The 33rd heaven of the celestial court. Many immortal corpses were strewn across the ground. The Lingshao Hall and bullfighting palace had already collapsed in the battle between Yi Xian and De Yi. The southern heavenly gate had also been reduced to ruins. Many pavilions and palaces had been reduced to ashes. The celestial court was in ruins, and it was clearly caused by De. Celestial Emperor Yi Xian. When Yi Xian returned to the celestial court, the Empyrean fairy and the other immortals hurried over to greet him. Everyone's eyes were filled with excitement because they had personally witnessed De Yi's defeat and escape. However, when everyone excitedly arrived at Yi Xian's side and wanted to congratulate him, the words in their mouths were all swallowed back. This was because at this moment, Yi Xian's entire body was emitting an unapproachable aura. An extremely cold feeling appeared in everyone's hearts. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. Yi Xian did not look at the Empyrean fairy and the other immortals of the celestial court. His eyes were cold as he surveyed the entire celestial court. The tragic death of every immortal was reflected in his eyes. He could also see the current state of the celestial court. Yi Xian. You. What's wrong with you? As the Queen Mother and Yi Xian's wife, the Empyrean fairy was the only one who could ask this question. This was because Yi Xian's aura was too cold at this moment. The immortals of the celestial court were as silent as cicadas in winter. You destroyed the southern heavenly gate and killed the members of the celestial court. Not bad, not bad. Yi Xian said coldly. A blood-red murderous intent filled the air. Where is Shengongbao? Yi Xian's eyes were dark as he asked. I'm here. Shengongbao's expression changed drastically. He suddenly had an extremely bad feeling in his heart. However, he still bowed, but his eyes were extremely heavy. Pass down my decree. Gather tens of millions of celestial soldiers and order the immortals to return to their positions. They will attack the ancestral land of the Wu tribe with me. Yi Xian's voice was cruel and ferocious. It was also filled with unimaginable murderous intent. Celestial Emperor, you can't do this. Shengongbao tried to dissuade him with a trembling voice. Celestial Emperor, please understand. The Wu tribe has the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery and many ancient great sorcerers. The celestial court is no match for the Wu tribe. Shengongbao, are you going against my will? Yi Xian's eyes were gloomy. A murderous intent flashed through his eyes. This also made Shengongbao's expression change drastically. He knew that Yi Xian was full of murderous intent and no one could stop him. Yi Xian, you, the Empyrean fairy frowned slightly. She was about to persuade Yi Xian, but before she could say anything, Yi Xian's cold and gloomy eyes greeted her. This made her lower her eyebrows and keep quiet. At this moment, the immortals of the celestial court kept quiet out of fear. Shengongbao was like an ant on a hot pan, not knowing what to do. From time to time, he winked at the immortals of the celestial court and secretly transmitted a message to the Empyrean fairy. Yes, De of the Wu tribe did kill his way to the celestial court. He even smashed the entire celestial court into pieces. Countless immortals died in his hands. However, people had to bow their heads under the eaves. The celestial court could not afford to offend the Wu tribe. Although Yi Xian defeated De and fled, if he really killed his way to the ancestral land of the Wu tribe, wouldn't this completely put the celestial court and the Wu tribe on opposite sides? One had to know that the sorcerer tribe was definitely one of the most terrifying forces in the world. Even the saints turned a blind eye to it. Apart from the ancient demon court in the past, no other orthodoxy had dared to go against the sorcerer tribe throughout the endless years. Shengongbao, didn't you hear my decree? Suddenly, just as Shengongbao was hesitating, Yi Xian's cold voice sounded again. This made Shengongbao's eyes extremely bitter. He hurriedly gathered the remnants of the celestial court and let the sound of war drums come from the 33 layers of the celestial court. Yi Xian, dressed in black, stood in the sky. He looked at the 33 layers of the celestial court from afar. A murderous aura filled the air, making it impossible for anyone to get close to him. Kind people are bullied, and kind horses are ridden. This was a principle that had never changed since the ancient times. From what Yi Xian knew, if the witch clan killed his people, then he would have to repay them 1,000 times over. Today, a single De Yi was able to cause the heavenly court to be in tatters. If another quasi-sage were to come in the future, would he have to repeat today's scene? Yi Xian was showing his power and responding to the Wu tribe. Not only would he kill the Wu tribe, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, blood for blood, but he would also return the disaster that the celestial court suffered 1,000 times over to the Wu tribe. He would also kill De Yi with his own hands. Not only was this revenge against the shaman clan, it was also a deterrent to the various orthodoxies. Even if it was a member of the shaman clan, the 33 heavenly courts that he, Yi Xian, had established wasn't something that anyone could bully. This was also the reason why Yi Xian made such a crazy decision. Even when Shen Gongbao and the Empyrean fairy tried to dissuade him, he gave them a warning with his cold eyes. With a half-step to sage-to-be and the heaven-destroying halberd in hand, he would not be Yi Xian if he still cowered and let De Yi kill all the people of the celestial court. Therefore, he must make the Wu tribe pay an unbearable price and let the Wu tribe know that he, Yi Xian, was not a pushover. Chapter 666. There were many things waiting to be done, and the losses were heavy. De Yi of the witch tribe had caused the celestial court to suffer heavy losses, and the celestial court could not resist a pre-saint. This was not only a disaster for the celestial court, but also a great humiliation for the celestial court. This humiliation was not only for the 33rd celestial court, but also for Yi Xian. Although De Yi had fled in defeat, and Yi Xian had destroyed his head, this was far from the end. Blood for blood, a tooth for a tooth. This was what Yi Xian wanted to do, and also what he had to do. On this day, the celestial court's war drums rumbled, and immortals gathered from all directions. Tens of thousands of celestial soldiers and generals were silent, and the atmosphere of the celestial court became extremely heavy. The bullfighting palace was reduced to nothing, and as far as the eye could see, there was only wreckage. Yi Xian stood in the ruins of the bullfighting palace, and a gloomy aura emanated from his body. However, his eyes were gloomy and deep, and no one knew what he was thinking. Logically speaking, the celestial court should be rebuilt after such a disaster, but Yi Xian did not choose to do so. When he sent down the celestial emperor's decree to attack the witch tribe, he had already expressed his attitude. The immortals of the celestial court, tens of thousands of celestial soldiers, were so dense that one could not see the end of them. However, their gazes were all focused on Yi Xian, and a fiery look flashed across their eyes. Celestial Emperor, Shen Gongbao walked over quickly, and bowed to Yi Xian. "Is everyone here?" Yi Xian asked in a low voice. 8 of the 28 mansions of the heavenly cycle have died, 3 of the 36 celestial stars have fallen, and millions of celestial river navy, as well as the divine ambassador. Shen Gongbao did not dare to delay, and quickly reported the casualties to Yi Xian. On this day, the immortals of the celestial court were silent, and the celestial soldiers and generals were silent. However, the celestial emperor's decree was sent to the 3 realms, and the entire 3 realms was in complete chaos. 3 months later, the celestial court would go all out to conquer the sorcerer tribe. When this news spread throughout the 3 realms, it caused an uproar. They could not believe their ears. However, this was not the end. Explosive news came one after another, directly affecting everyone's nerves. Many Inspector Heavenly ambassadors walked out of the celestial court, carrying Yi Xian's decree to the various orthodoxies. In the name of the Master of the 3 realms, the orthodoxies were to gather all their immortals in 3 months and attack the shamans together. When the news spread throughout the 3 realms, it caused a huge uproar. This was the first time Yi Xian had used the name of the heavenly monarch to command the orthodoxies to do his bidding. However, no one knew what the orthodoxy's attitude was. The great thunderous roar of spiritual mountain. Duo Bao Rulai sneered and threw Yi Xian's decree aside. Yi Xian and the monkey had almost overturned his spirit mountain. Now that the celestial court was going against the sorcerer tribe, this was something that he could not be happier about. Why would he listen to Yi Xian's orders? Needless to say, the Chanism lineage did not care about the outside world at all. They did not respond to the so-called heavenly monarch's decree at all. The various immortal sects in the four seas were also evasive, obviously not listening to the decree. As for the underworld, there was no response at all. Yi Xian's decree was like a stone sinking into the sea. The master of the three realms, the heavenly monarch, commanded the world and made all living things submit to him. This sounded good, but it was extremely difficult to do. Back then, the Jade Emperor could tell that the so-called master of the three realms was just a name. Although Yi Xian was definitely not the Jade Emperor, and the orthodoxies were extremely fearful of him, one should not forget that Yi Xian was about to go crazy and launch a punitive expedition against the sorcerer tribe. This was an act of suicide, and the orthodoxies did not want to be involved in this matter. As expected, Yi Xian used the name of the heavenly monarch to command the three realms, but the orthodoxies did not respond at all. For a moment, the 33-layered celestial court and Yi Xian were in an extremely awkward situation. However, this was not the end. Another earth-shattering piece of news came, and it was also this piece of news that completely threw the three realms into chaos. A wave of enthusiasm swept through the three realms. Divine weapons, secret techniques, cultivation methods, spiritual herbs, and even the peaches of immortality, as well as the legendary 9 transformations golden pill, were all heard by everyone in the three realms. The heavenly monarch had decreed that anyone who killed a member of the sorcerer tribe, ranging from an ordinary sorcerer to an ancient sorcerer, would be open to the celestial court's treasury, and would be rewarded handsomely. Regardless of cultivation methods, secret techniques, or the peaches of immortality, as long as one could bring a sorcerer tribe's head to the celestial court would not be stingy in giving them anything they wanted. The world was bustling for profit, and the world was bustling for profit. This was an eternal truth, and it also caused countless people to scramble for it. As the saying went, wealth moved people's hearts. How vast was the three realms? There were also countless itinerant cultivators. When they received this news, there were already people who took the risk and focused their attention on the sorcerer tribe. Of course, these itinerant immortals did not have high cultivations. The strongest among them was only at the second grand heavenly realm, but they were outnumbered. Although they did not dare to enter the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe, there were always some sorcerer tribe members in the outside world. This caused the sorcerer tribe members in the outside world to suffer an unimaginable disaster. Fresh blood spilled in every corner of the three realms, and the 4 great continents were thrown into chaos. As long as there were traces of the sorcerer tribe, countless immortals would hunt them down in a frenzy. The sorcerer tribe's individual combat strength was indeed terrifying, but even a tiger could not withstand a pack of wolves. Under the human wave tactic, countless sorcerer tribe members in the three realms died tragically. The world was in chaos, and a calamity had descended. This was all because of Yi Xian's decree, and the various orthodoxies had a taste of Yi Xian's madness. No one knew how the situation would develop. At the same time, Spirit Platform Fengsuan Mountain, Cave of the Slanting Moon and 3 Stars. Wukong, do you really want to get involved in this calamity? A Taoist with white hair and a youthful complexion sat cross-legged in the void, speaking in a low voice. Master, I owe him a debt of gratitude. Even if a saint stands in my way, I will still lend him a helping hand. Sun Wukong was clad in black battle armor, and he held the Rui Jingu Bang in his hand. Before you get involved in this calamity, I must remind you that the great calamity of the world has already begun, and Yi Xian is the one who will face it. Moreover, there is an extremely terrifying figure behind him. Not only is this person his master, but he has also been spying on and plotting against him. If you get too involved with him, I'm afraid you will not have a good ending in the future. Patriarch Bodhi said profoundly. How terrifying. Could it be one of the 6 great saints? Sun Wukong's eyes narrowed when he heard Patriarch Bodhi's words. Wukong, this world is not as simple as you think it is. Although some people are not saints, their foundation is not something you can imagine. Even I, as your master, do not wish to get involved. That's all I have to say. You may leave now. Patriarch Bodhi sighed. Sun Wukong frowned when he saw Patriarch Bodhi's solemn expression. Although he did not know Patriarch Bodhi's background, he knew that Patriarch Bodhi was a person of great ability. Chapter 667. For Patriarch Bodhi to be so cautious, there must be a great horror behind it. However, Goku did not continue to ask because he knew that even if he asked, Patriarch Bodhi would not tell him. I'll take my leave. Goku memorized Patriarch Bodhi's words. A cloud rose under his feet and floated into the distance. He was heading towards the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe. Obviously, he would not watch Yi Xian fight alone. As Goku left, Patriarch Bodhi slowly opened his eyes. A hint of worry flashed across his eyes, and he let out a long sigh. Obviously, Patriarch Bodhi must know some secrets that others did not know. However, he had something that he could not say, so he could only point it out. In the end, he could not stop Goku from being involved in this great calamity. Longevity Mountain, 5th Manor. Grand Immortal Jin Yuan sat cross-legged under the ginseng fruit tree. A Taoist in green sat opposite him. There was a black chessboard between the two of them. It was obvious that they were in the middle of a game. I didn't expect that even De Yi would be defeated by this kid. However, he actually dared to suppress the sorcerer tribe. This is too impulsive, the Taoist in green said in a low voice. Ha! Grand Immortal Jin Yuan smiled and said, this kid is cautious and will never act rashly. You still don't know him. Although he seems crazy this time, as long as the 12 ancestral sorcerers don't appear, he will not be in any danger. Instead, the sorcerer tribe will suffer a heavy blow. I don't think so. Although the ancestral sorcerers don't appear, you have to know that there are many ancient sorcerers in the sorcerer tribe. Although they are scattered all over the 3 realms, there must be a great sorcerer in the ancestral land. I'm afraid that Yi Xian will not return, the Taoist in green said softly. Yes, you're right. Grand Immortal Jin Yuan nodded. Then, he smiled and looked at the Taoist in green. He said, I'll have to trouble you to go personally this time. It's time for you to appear. All right. The Taoist in green placed the last chess piece. His entire body suddenly turned illusory and disappeared from 5th Manor. Yi Xian, do you know that the ancient demon court has reappeared in the world? The sorcerer tribe is your enemy, and the ancient demon court is lurking behind you. Do you know that you are already in danger? Grand Immortal Jin Yuan placed the black chess piece. His eyes were slightly deep as he muttered. The 33rd Celestial Court. The war drums of the Celestial Court rumbled, and the golden clouds rose into the sky. Tens of millions of celestial soldiers and celestial generals rose into the sky. The celestial emperors rose into the sky, and the immortals of the Celestial Court stood in all directions. A murderous aura surrounded the 33 layers of the Celestial Court. Rumble. The Celestial Court was in turmoil. Everyone came out in full force. Other than a few immortal officials and fairies who did not have the ability to fight, there was not a single person in the Celestial Court today. Under the leadership of Yi Xian, tens of millions of celestial soldiers and generals went down to the lower realm. They passed through the 33 layers of the Celestial Court, traversed 5,000 kilometers of gales, lightning, and fire, and boundless golden clouds that blotted out the sky. The banner of the Celestial Court fluttered with the wind, and the might of the Celestial Court shook the 3 dimensions, causing it to draw the attention of countless living beings in the 3 dimensions. In the vast firmament, golden clouds shot out. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the Celestial Emperor's celestial chariot. His eyes were gloomy and deep. No one knew what he was thinking, and no one knew why Yi Xian wanted to launch a punitive expedition against the sorcerer tribe. The orthodoxies ignored the Celestial Emperor's decree and did not listen to Yi Xian's orders. Yi Xian had expected this to happen. This was just one of his moves, and there would be a day when it would ferment. Celestial Emperor, the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe is hidden without a trace. The sky appraiser can only detect its approximate location. If you want to find the door to the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe, I'm afraid you'll have to do it yourself. Obviously, the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe was too secretive, and very few people knew about it. In the entire celestial court, only Yi Xian was comparable to a sage-to-be. If they wanted to find the door to the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe, they could only rely on Yi Xian. From this, it could be seen that the celestial court lacked a sage-to-be. After all, it was indeed difficult to rely on Yi Xian alone. There's no need to look. The sorcerer tribe has appeared. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked into the distant horizon with his transcendence vision. He saw a heavenly gate appear, and a figure was walking out of the gate, looking in the direction of Yi Xian. I'm Lingxi. Greetings to Yi Tiandi. In front of the heavenly gate, a sorcerer clasped his hands and bowed. It was also at this moment that the golden clouds that covered the sky surged over, and the Celestial Emperor's Dharma carriage also appeared in front of the heavenly gate. Yi Tiandi, as the saying goes, where it's possible to forgive, one should forgive. Since the great sorcerer of my tribe has been defeated, why do you have to go to war with the sorcerer tribe? The sorcerer tribe member was neither servile nor overbearing, and his mouth was rumbling. Obviously, the news that Yi Xian was going to attack the sorcerer tribe had already spread, and he had been waiting here for a long time, hoping that Yi Xian would back off. Kill him. Yi Xian's cold voice rang out quietly, and this made Shen Gongbao, who was beside him, slightly stunned. Just as he was about to dissuade Yi Xian, someone had already attacked. Die! Qing Tian roared, and demonic light exploded. The sky-devouring toad and dozens of other great demon kings charged towards the sorcerer tribe violently, and all sorts of demonic techniques were unleashed. After tens of thousands of years, the sky-devouring toad and the others had already become zenith heavenly immortals, and their cultivation was not what it was in the past. Ah! The sorcerer tribe member did not even have time to dodge, and he was instantly torn into pieces by the dozens of great demon kings. The sky-devouring toad even opened his mouth and chewed excitedly, and the terrifying scene was too terrifying. The demon race was bloodthirsty, and they moved at the smell of blood, especially the sky-devouring toad and the others. In the past, they had followed Yi Xian in the North Continent, and were ferocious demon kings. In the past tens of thousands of years, under the endless resources of the Celestial Court, they had even stepped into the zenith heavenly immortals, and they were even more obedient to Yi Xian, and would not doubt Yi Xian's orders at all. From this, it could be seen that although Shen Gongbao was loyal to Yi Xian, he was still a disciple of the Jie sect, and he had to consider the overall situation of the world and the interests of the Jie sect. However, the sky-devouring toad and the other great demon kings were different. As long as Yi Xian willed it, they would definitely move forward with a thirst for blood. The sorcerer tribe member died tragically on the spot. Even though his physical body was as strong as a zenith heavenly immortal, he could only die with hatred under the attacks of dozens of great demon kings. If he had known that this would be the outcome, he would definitely not have been the sorcerer tribe member. Destroy the gate of the sorcerer tribe, and kill all the members of the sorcerer tribe. Leave no one alive. Yi Xian said coldly, and the sky-devouring toad and the dozens of great demon kings accepted the order with a thirst for blood. They immediately activated their great demon arts, and violently bombarded the gate of the sorcerer tribe. Bang! Although the dozens of great Luo demon kings were only at the first dividing line of the zenith heavenly immortal realm, when their power gathered together, the gate of heaven shattered with a loud bang, and they charged into the world of the sorcerer tribe with bloodthirsty and violent smiles on their faces. Rumble. The heavenly emperor's dermic carriage crossed the sky and directly entered the world of the sorcerer tribe. This also caused millions of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals to follow, and Tongtian's earth-shattering murderous aura erupted at this moment. Chapter 668. The land of the shamans was vast and boundless. This was the pure land of the shamans, and also the ancestral land where they lived and cultivated. Other than the members of the shamans, outsiders were not allowed to enter, or else they would be killed. However, on this day, the cries of battle in the ancestral land of the shamans shook the heavens. Heavenly soldiers and generals that blotted out the sun charged over, causing the entire land of the shamans to tremble. The vast land was filled with endless mountains. Numerous towering peaks were connected to the heavens and earth. However, the terrifying immortal light rained down, turning the mountain peaks into dust. The mountains were blasted into smithereens. The roars of demons and the shouts of immortals could be heard. Kill all the members of the shaman tribe. Don't leave a single one alive. Rumble. Thunder rumbled in the world as the celestial Dharma carriage boomed in the firmament. Yi Xian finally got up from his cross-legged position. He walked out of the celestial Dharma carriage as the 8 inspector heavenly ambassadors stood by his sides. How dare you! Chi! Chi! Billowing blood energy rippled through the sky, and evil sorcery light soared into the sky. Numerous towering mountains were glowing, and a silhouette soared into the sky from the top of every mountain. A total of 108 silhouettes were treading on the sky as they flew over. How dare you, Yi Xian! How dare you offend the shaman tribe! Today, you won't be able to leave. 108 senior magi rushed over, and wherever they passed, a large number of divine warriors would die right on the spot. Their ferocious aura was way too terrifying. The 108 grand shamans were all comparable to Daluo Jingxian. Most of them were at the first watershed of Grand Heavenly Realm, and there were even peak figures at the third watershed of Grand Heavenly Realm. When these 108 grand shamans attacked, the Celestial Court's army immediately showed signs of defeat. 8 gates of life and death, turn immortal into mortal. Yi Xian's eyes were gloomy. He had not used the inverse immortal array for a long time. Bright starlight shot up into the sky, and an unfathomable chi exploded. Inverse immortal array diagram. It was created by Lu Bai. Although he was immortal, he was a peerless genius. The inverse celestial array diagram was created with his blood, sweat, and tears, at the cost of his soul. It contained unfathomable power. The inverse celestial array diagram buzzed and directly channeled the luminous starry sky. Rays of starlight fell and directly gathered into 8 gates in the sorcerer world. These were the 8 gates of life and death. These were the 8 gates of heaven and earth. They could turn immortals into mortals, and they could even weaken one's cultivation. Even the people of the shaman tribe would be restrained by the immortal-defying array. Kill them all, leave no one alive. Yi Xian let out a gloomy roar, and it made the over 100 great Luo demon kings behind him let out bloodthirsty roars. There were even over 100 Daluo Jingxian roaring with battle cries that shook the heavens as they charged towards the 108 grand shamans. The inverse immortal formation had seized the fortune of the heaven and earth, and possessed an unfathomable power. It had directly suppressed the cultivation base of these great magi by a whole realm, which had thrown all 108 great magi into a great confusion. Go to hell. The sky-devouring toad was frenzied and bloodthirsty, and its ferocious mouth was laughing maniacally. An extremely sinister demonic light condensed in its palms, and it directly slapped towards one of the great magi. Bang! The great magi struck out with his palm, and an earth-shattering explosion was heard. However, his expression changed drastically, because his palms had already been corroded by the demonic poison, and were currently emitting white smoke as they melted inch by inch. Die for Lao Tzu. The sky-devouring toad did not back down after gaining the upper hand. It opened its ferocious mouth, and its fangs that flickered with cold light caught half of the great Magi's body in its mouth. Following a series of violent chewing sounds, the great Magi was actually bitten to death by half of his body. It was not only the sky-devouring toad that was frenzied and bloodthirsty, but the other demon kings were also the same. After tens of thousands of years, under the cultivation of the celestial court's endless resources, they had all stepped into the zenith heavenly realm. They were also bestowed with various sinister secret techniques by Yi Xian, and their current cultivation base was incomparable to the past. The Heavenly Rock King transformed into the true form of the Great Rock, and his pair of terrifying sharp claws tore apart a great Magi. He let out a ferocious roar and directly swallowed the great Magi into his stomach. There was also Rock Mo, who was at the peak of the zenith heavenly realm. He was like a tiger that had entered a flock of sheep, and he fought with a dozen great Magi. With a move of his palm and finger, he exploded a great Magi in the void, and his blood splattered all over the sky. Shen Gongbao, who was holding the celestial slashing sword, had become a fierce god. The celestial slashing sword was too unbeatable. Every slash of the sword would directly cut a great Magi in half, and a murderous aura that soared into the sky spread out at this moment. Behind him, the Daluo Jingxian from the Jia school did not show any weakness either. With the goddess of golden spirit as the leader, each of them displayed their means to kill these great Magi. For a moment, this place became extremely violent. The sound of killing shook the sky, and Magi blood splattered everywhere. The 108 great Magi were retreating step by step, and the army of the celestial court was advancing with an irresistible force. At this moment, their momentum had risen to the peak. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in the sky with his hands behind his back. He looked at the scene in front of him with gloomy eyes, but there was no excitement in his eyes, and no one knew what he was thinking. He knew his own strength well. Yi Xian knew the strength of the celestial court too well. If he did not set up the inverse immortal formation, his troops would not be a match for these 108 great Magi who had just appeared. Although they were all Daluo Jingxian, the Wu tribe was naturally stronger than the immortals, and their physical bodies were unparalleled. If it was a fair battle, the celestial court would definitely suffer heavy losses. However, there was no such thing as fairness in this world, and Yi Xian did not believe in so-called fairness. In order to reduce the casualties of the celestial court, he naturally had to use the inverse immortal formation to suppress the cultivation of the Wu tribe. Only in this way could the immortals of the celestial court fight with these Wu tribe. Moreover, for tens of thousands of years, the celestial court had been too comfortable, so comfortable that they were afraid to move forward. Yi Xian wanted to reignite the fierce fire in the hearts of these people of the celestial court, so that they could really be used by him. Yi Xian could kill these great Magi himself, but if he had to deal with these people personally, what use would he have for these subordinates? He would not have tried to seize the throne of the celestial emperor in the past. The killing continued, and the sound of killing was heard. Dozens of great Magi died tragically in the sky, and the celestial court also lost some demon kings and immortals. Even with the inverse immortal formation, the Wu tribe was not a lamb that could be killed at will. Retreat! Suddenly, a great Magi covered in blood yelled at his companions crazily. He stared at Yi Xian, and then fled to the center of the Wu tribe's ancestral land. Today, all of you will die. Yi Xian slowly walked through the sky as his fingers rumbled with light. When he struck out with his palm, the primal chaos divine light covered the sky and covered the earth, directly transforming into a giant palm that could hold up the sky as it descended, causing the dozens of fleeing great shamans to let out mournful and furious roars. Bang! The giant palm that covered the sky for millions of miles was like an ancient divine mountain that fell to the world. It was so powerful that it could shatter all mountains and rivers, and it gave people a feeling that it could destroy the world. Rumble. The mountains within 1,000,000 kilometers turned into ashes, and dozens of great shamans exploded into pieces in the air. A rain of blood poured down from the sky, and the vast land within 1,000,000 kilometers sank tens of thousands of meters. Terrifying ravines appeared on the vast land, and it showed how terrifying Yi Xian's attack was. Chapter 669. The Tongtian impasse had suppressed an area. Yi Xian was too powerful and too terrifying. He strolled through the sky, and with every step he took, he walked towards the center of the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe. The members of the celestial court followed him. Yi Xian was invincible, and he was the supreme ruler of the world. This was his current power and dignity. Since the sorcerer tribe dared to kill a member of the celestial court, he would pay the sorcerer tribe back with blood. He would pay the sorcerer tribe back 10 times, 100 times, or even 1,000 times. Ancestral Sorcerer Mountain. This was a chaotic divine mountain. According to the legends, this mountain came from the chaos, and was the holy land of the Magus clan. Anyone who could enter the ancestral Magus mountain had to be a senior Magus. Every sorcerer tribesman's lifelong dream was to enter the ancestral sorcerer mountain to cultivate. This was also the most sacred place of the sorcerer tribe. Great sorcerer was a general term. Anyone who was comparable to Daluo Jingxian could be called a great sorcerer. However, there were differences in rank. From the first watershed of Daluo to the sage-to-be of the sorcerer tribe, they were all called great sorcerer. There was another term above great sorcerer, which was ancient sorcerer. The ancient sorcerers were below the ancestral sorcerers and above the grand sorcerers. They were the real big shots of the sorcerer tribe. In the days when the 12 ancient sorcerers were not around, these ancient sorcerers were the supreme beings who ruled the sorcerer tribe. However, the whereabouts of these ancient shamans were uncertain. Even the members of the shaman tribe rarely saw them. They had only heard of their names and deeds. It was said that there was an ancient shaman guarding the ancestral shaman mountain, but very few people knew which ancient shaman it was. Rumble. Wisps of mysterious sorcery light rippled through the world. A temple glowed at the peak of the ancestral sorcerer mountain. Tens of thousands of sorcerers walked out from the mountains and kowtowed to the temple with pious looks on their faces. Kill. A giant palm that covered the sky gathered in the sky and descended towards the ancestral sorcerer temple with a destructive power. However, the tens of thousands of sorcerer tribesmen remained expressionless, as if they did not see it. They continued to worship the ancestral sorcerer temple sincerely. Wang. Time seemed to have stopped, and space seemed to have frozen. Chants of sutras came from the ancestral sorcerer temple, and a mysterious symbol rippled out, silently turning the huge palm into nothingness. Go back to where you came from. The shaman tribe is not a place where you can behave atrociously. A hoarse voice came from the ancestral sorcerer temple. Although no one walked out of the temple, when this voice rang out, the space-time of the area changed. The laws of heaven and earth exploded. The terrifying phenomenon was not something an ordinary person could imagine. Rumble. Yi Xian was dressed in black as he slowly walked over. His gray hair hung behind his head, and a gust of wind blew over, causing his hair to flutter in the wind. He stood in the air above the ancestral Magus mountain and looked down at the ancestral Magus temple. Thump, thump, thump. The war drums of the celestial court were beating. The god of thunder and the goddess of lightning were controlling the lightning. The black mass of heavenly soldiers was endless. The roars of the demons and immortals could be heard as they surrounded the entire ancestral Magus mountain. How pretentious. Let's see how capable you are. Yi Xian sneered in the sky. His sword finger tore through the sky, and tens of thousands of heaven-splitting divine lightning bolts wreaked havoc in the sky. Endless thunderclouds exploded, and the azure lightning bolts shook the heavens and split the earth. As Yi Xian's sword finger descended, tens of thousands of divine lightning bolts violently smashed down towards the ancestral Magus mountain. How dare you! Suddenly, a heaven-shaking roar sounded out. The ancestral Magus temple rumbled with light, and a stooped old Magus walked out with a walking stick. Resplendent and surging divine light exploded out, directly dissolving the tens of thousands of bolts of divine lightning. At this moment, he even raised his eyes to look at Yi Xian. Elder Wu. Whoosh, whoosh, hundreds of great shamans shot out from the ancestral Magus mountain and stood behind the elder. They bowed to him, and their eyes were filled with reverence. The elder Wu was a servant of the ancestral Magus temple. He was a servant who guarded the temple. Although he was a servant, he was still a sage-to-be. Moreover, he was not an ordinary sage-to-be. His cultivation was comparable to a sage-to-be who had severed a corpse. Since the day the shaman tribe was born, the elder had been guarding the ancestral Magus temple. The statues of the 12 ancient shamans were placed in the temple. He could be said to be the most devout servant of the shaman tribe, so he was revered by the shaman tribe. Today, Yi Xian had brought all the troops of the celestial court to attack. As a servant who guarded the ancestral Magus temple, he could not sit idly by and allow Yi Xian to behave atrociously in the ancestral Magus mountain. Yi Tiandi, I advise you not to push your luck. Go back to where you came from. The elder Wu tapped the walking stick in his hand and said in a low voice. Old men who don't die are thieves. Although trash like you are a sage-to-be of the shaman tribe, your bloodline is so weak. How dare you talk back to me? Yi Xian's eyes were fierce. He was strolling down from the sky until he landed on the peak of the ancestral Magus mountain. He looked at the elder Wu with a cruel murderous look. How dare you insult the elders of our tribe? A great shaman glared at Yi Xian and shouted angrily. Die! Suddenly, Yi Xian didn't seem to have done anything, but the world suddenly distorted. A giant hand of starlight suddenly appeared in front of the great shaman and directly grabbed him in its hand. Bang! The giant starry sky hand directly crushed the great shaman in its hand, and its severed arm flew into the air, causing the demon kings behind Yi Xian to fight over it. They threw it into their mouths in large mouthfuls, and were currently chewing on it bloodthirstily. Such a scene caused Elder Wu's face to darken, and it caused the dozens of great shamans to glare angrily at Yi Xian. However, if one observed carefully, they would discover that a trace of fear flashed through the eyes of these great shamans. How dare you kill a member of the shaman tribe in front of me? The Elder Wu's hair stood on end. The veins on his withered hand bulged as he roared at Yi Xian fiercely. Kill a member of the shaman tribe? Yi Xian smiled. He really smiled. However, his smile was too terrifying and gave people a feeling of cruelty and viciousness. Where is the sky-swallowing toad? Yi Xian suddenly asked coldly. Here. The sky-swallowing toad grinned and walked quickly to Yi Xian. His eyes were shining with a bloodthirsty light. I'll give you the inverse immortal formation diagram. Lead all the troops of the celestial court and kill every shaman tribe member on the ancestral Magus mountain. Don't let anyone go, whether they are old or weak, women or children, Yi Xian said viciously. Yes, Celestial Emperor. The sky-swallowing toad smiled cruelly. He bowed and took the inverse immortal formation diagram from Yi Xian. His bloodthirsty and violent aura exploded. How dare you! The Elder Wu took a step forward. The ancestral Magus mountain shook violently. His eyes were bloodshot. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be so audacious. What are you waiting for? Remember, kill them all. Don't let anyone go. Yi Xian directly ignored Elder Wu as he gloomily looked at the sky-swallowing toad. This also caused the sky-swallowing toad to obediently nod its head and directly call for all the troops of the heavenly court to madly enter the ancestral Magus mountain and begin their massacre. Chapter 670. Rumble. Elder Wu finally made his move. Tong Tian witchcraft light exploded and the heavens and earth within 1,000,000 miles rumbled and shook. Grand witchcraft spells were condensed and it was obvious that he wanted to stop this catastrophe from happening. The great witches behind him could not just sit and wait for their deaths. They all wanted to chase after the sky-swallowing toad and the others. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was here. How could they stop him so easily? A chaotic heavenly blade condensed in the sky and slashed towards Elder Wu and the others. The terrifying sky-splitting blade radiance was too dazzling and too invincible. With a loud roar, it directly blocked Elder Wu and the others. Bang! The heavenly blade was unparalleled and could destroy mountains and rivers. Elder Wu struck out with his palm and shattered the heavenly blade into light and shadow. However, at this moment, tens of millions of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals had already entered the ancestral Sorcerer Mountain under the sky-swallowing toad's lead. It was obvious that a massacre was about to begin in the ancestral Sorcerer Mountain. Kill. The 8 gates of life and death, immortal transformation and mortal transformation. With the inverse immortal array diagram in hand, the celestial court's morale was high and they crazily engaged in a fierce battle with the sorcerer tribesmen in the ancestral Sorcerer Mountain. Immortal blood spilled on the mountain and the sorcerer tribesmen roared in anger. This was an evenly matched battle. Even though the celestial court had the inverse immortal array diagram in hand and could reduce the sorcerer tribesmen's cultivation, the sorcerer tribesmen in the ancestral Sorcerer Mountain were also terrifyingly strong. It was hard to tell who would win. This was only the beginning. One had to know that the world of the shaman race was extremely vast. There were a total of 12 ancestral shaman mountains, and each ancestral shaman mountain had an ancestral shaman temple. Yi Xian was only in one of them. As mentioned before, the sorcerer tribe was one of the most powerful forces in the world. It was not as simple as it seemed. Other than the 12 ancestral sorcerer mountains, the sorcerer tribesmen were scattered all over the ancestral sorcerer world. Although their cultivation varied, they were all charging towards the ancestral Sorcerer Mountain where Yi Xian was. At this moment, Elder Wu's face darkened. He looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. He really could not understand. Was Yi Xian crazy? He had sent all the troops of the Celestial Court to attack. This was like throwing an egg at a rock. When the sorcerer tribe from other places arrived, the 10 million troops of the Celestial Court would all die tragically here. Yi Xian, it's still not too late for you to leave now. If you wait for the shaman tribe to gather, it'll be too late for you to leave even if you want to. The old Wu tapped his walking stick on the ground as he growled. Leave. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. He looked around and said in a cold voice, You sorcerer tribe dared to kill a member of the Celestial Court. You sorcerer tribe must pay the price. Do you think I will leave? Yi Xian, I want to warn you. The ancestral Sorcerer Mountain is the holy land of the sorcerer tribe. If you dare to continue behaving atrociously and attract the ancient sorcerer tribe, you won't be able to leave today even if you're the celestial emperor of the 3 realms. I'll destroy your ancestral Sorcerer Mountain and destroy your so-called ancestral Sorcerer Temple. I want to see how powerful the sorcerer tribe is. Yi Xian did not waste any more time and strode toward the ancestral Sorcerer Temple. As the saying went, killing someone's heart. Yi Xian did not care about these people at all. He wanted to destroy the ancestral Sorcerer Temple with his own hands. This was also destroying the sorcerer tribe's so-called faith. When a tribe's faith was destroyed, it would undoubtedly be a heavy blow. Yi Xian would either not do it or go to the extreme. There was a saying that went, if you don't kill the snake, it will bite you. Yi Xian did not hold back at all. He wanted to teach the sorcerer tribe a bloody lesson. How dare you? Looking at Yi Xian walking toward the ancestral sorcerer temple, Elder Wu could no longer remain calm. Divine light burst out from his body and the bloodline qi in his body rumbled. He pounced toward Yi Xian. Everyone, let's attack together. We can't let him destroy the ancestral sorcerer temple. A great shaman roared with a trembling voice, which also caused the other great shamans to respond. Dozens of great shamans tore through the air with their bodies and brazenly slapped out with their great shaman arts, all of them charging towards Yi Xian. Trash like you dare to make a move against this emperor. Yi Xian's eyes were cold. His arms seemed to be able to move the heavens and earth. 2 rays of fist radiance were like the 9 heavens river. Chaotic divine light shook the 9 heavens and charged toward Elder Wu and the rest. Bang! 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 The first ray of fist radiance illuminated the 9 heavens as if it had shattered the Milky Way and shattered the stars. A great sorcerer exploded into a mist of blood and died on the spot. The second ray of fist radiance crushed everything and killed 3 great sorcerers in the void. The laws of heaven and earth were collapsing and all living things were dying. When Yi Xian stepped into the half-step to sage to be, he had a cultivation that was comparable to severing one corpse. This was also the terror of proving one's Tao through strength. Moreover, Yi Xian's immortal body of the great all-embracing heaven was already stronger than the sorcerer tribe. This was only because he had not reached the great all-embracing heaven. If he could reach the great all-embracing heaven, his cultivation would be even more terrifying. Bang! 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 His fists were like stars that filled the sky, suppressing rivers and mountains, and his palm was like a falling star. The so-called great shaman wasn't even a match for Yi Xian. Their bodies exploded one after another, and a surging rain of blood sprinkled down from the sky. Retreat! The rest of the great sorcerers screamed in horror. Although they were from the sorcerer tribe, facing an invincible enemy, they would only die on the spot if they fought fearlessly. These great sorcerers were not stupid. They retreated from the battlefield in horror. Yi Xian, you are too presumptuous. Although the great sorcerer was old, he was still the guardian of the ancestral sorcerer temple. His cultivation was comparable to severing one corpse. At this moment, he was using the sorcerer tribe's great sorcerer art to attack Yi Xian. Old thing, you are courting death. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. His palms and fingers were like the sky, shattering the void. The brilliant giant palms fell and collided with the great sorcerer. Bang! 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 Yi Xian was too domineering and unfathomable. The divine light around his body soared as his fists rotated like a millstone between heaven and earth. Every time his fist smashed down, Elder Wu would be in a sorry state to block it, and his entire body would be violently retreating. Crack! The sound of bones cracking could be heard from the great sorcerer's fists. His fists were already badly mangled. This was caused by the collision with Yi Xian because his physical body could not be compared to Yi Xian's. Bang! Yi Xian punched the sky. The brilliant fist radiance was too dazzling. It pierced through millions of miles of the void and smashed the great sorcerer from the sky onto the peak of the ancestral sorcerer mountain. A loud bang shook the ancestral sorcerer mountain. If the ancestral sorcerer mountain was not so mystical, the power released by Yi Xian alone would have been enough to turn the ancestral sorcerer mountain into ashes. Yi Xian, I will fight you to the death. The great sorcerer soared into the sky. He was sublimating to the extreme. Blood qi and sorcerer light rippled in all directions. He charged at Yi Xian again like a mad demon. Too slow, too slow. You old thing, you are too slow. The great sorcerer swung his fists madly at Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian was smiling cruelly. He did not seem to counterattack. He only moved his body slightly, causing the great sorcerer's attacks to miss. Humiliation, extreme humiliation. It was a humiliation that he had never experienced before. When Elder Wu felt the humiliation that Yi Xian had given him, it also caused him to go completely mad. His body violently swelled, and his face was extremely red. Blood continuously flowed out from the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he was angry and anxious. Scram. Rumble. The heavens shook and the earth rumbled. Yi Xian no longer had any interest in Elder Wu. His voice was cruel and cold as he slapped down with his palm, sending Elder Wu flying. Elder Wu's body cracked inch by inch as he spat out mouthfuls of blood. His entire body once again smashed onto the peak of the ancestral Magus mountain like a kite with its string cut. It was not that the great sorcerer was not strong. It was just that he had encountered Yi Xian. Whether it was in terms of cultivation or physical strength, Yi Xian could completely crush him. The great sorcerer was no match for Yi Xian. The reason was simple. Although the great sorcerer was comparable to a sage-to-be who had severed one corpse, the blood qi in his body was old. Moreover, he was only an ordinary sorcerer and did not have his own divine powers. How could he be a match for Yi Xian? Even De Yi's 10th arrow of the shooting sun was defeated. How could an ordinary sorcerer tribe sage to be like him? Rumble. Yi Xian stepped on the sky. His feet were glowing. Before the great sorcerer could get up and continue fighting, his terrifying feet were like two immemorial divine mountains. They ruthlessly and cruelly stepped on the great sorcerer's chest. Crack. The sound of several ribs breaking could be heard. The great sorcerer's chest had completely caved in. Blood spurted out from his mouth. He had completely lost his ability to fight and was being stepped on by Yi Xian. Great sorcerer. In the distance, a dozen great sorcerer who had survived roared in grief. Their eyes were as red as blood. However, they were powerless in the face of Yi Xian, the most ferocious person in history. Yi Xian. You. If you have the ability, then kill me. The great sorcerer was bleeding from his 7 orifices. He stared at Yi Xian and spoke in a weak trembling voice. Even if he died, he would never beg for mercy from Yi Xian. The sorcerer tribe was never afraid of death and would never beg for mercy from anyone. This was the dignity of the sorcerer tribe and was more important than their lives. Do you want to die? Yi Xian stepped on the great sorcerer's head and crushed it back and forth. A cruel and eerie smile appeared on his face. I admire people who are not afraid of death. However, I will not kill you. I want you to see the destruction of the ancestral sorcerer temple with your own eyes. Crack. Ah! Suddenly, Yi Xian broke Elder Wu's legs with a stomp. The sound of his knees breaking sounded out in horror, causing Elder Wu to let out a mournful scream. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat, and his entire body convulsed and trembled in pain on the ground. Kneel properly. I want you to see the destruction of the ancestral sorcerer temple in front of you with your own eyes. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. He grabbed the great sorcerer's pale hair and lifted him up. He forced the great sorcerer's broken knees to kneel on the ground. He cast an immortal spell and fixed the great sorcerer on the spot. It was impossible for him to move even if he wanted to. Yi Xian turned around abruptly and strode towards the ancestral sorcerer temple. This made the great sorcerer roar in grief. Large amounts of blood tears flowed out of his murky, blood-red eyes. You bastard, you will die a horrible death. The great sorcerer knelt on the ground. His body was covered in blood and there was no part of him that was unharmed. He cursed with hatred and hatred. However, the blood tears in his eyes were rolling down his cheeks. His voice was shrill and hoarse. Chapter 671. The mountains trembled and battle cries filled the sky. The troops of the Celestial Court and the Sorcerer Tribe had already reached the climax of their battle. Blood splattered across every inch of the mountain, and angry roars could be heard. The Elder Wu roared hysterically. He glared at Yi Xian's back as he walked away. He cursed and cursed, but he could not stop Yi Xian from walking towards the ancestral sorcerer temple. There were a total of 12 ancestral sorcerer mountains in the sorcerer tribe's world. Each ancestral sorcerer mountain had an ancestral sorcerer temple, and the ancestral sorcerer statue was enshrined there. The ancestral sorcerer mountain that Yi Xian was enshrining the Candle Dragon's ancestral sorcerer statue. The Candle Dragon was one of the 12 ancient ancestral sorcerers. He had another name, the ancestral sorcerer of time. Time was the most mysterious and unpredictable. Even the sages did not dare to touch it. It involved the past, present, and future. The Candle Dragon was also an extremely mysterious existence among the 12 ancient ancestral sorcerers. Legend had it that the Candle Dragon could reverse time and travel to the past and future. As he was the ancestral sorcerer of time, even the sages could not do anything to him. However, this legend was too exaggerated. If the Candle Dragon could really travel to the past and future, the Great Sorcerer Tribulation would not have happened. The sorcerer tribe would not have fought against the ancient demon court and would have become the main characters of this world. In front of the ancestral sorcerer temple, Yi Xian had his hands behind his back and stared at the ancestral sorcerer temple. The chaotic divine light surrounded his body. He raised his right palm and a terrifying chaotic divine light gathered in his palm. It was as if he was going to destroy the ancestral sorcerer temple in the next moment. Yi Xian, if you destroy my ancestral sorcerer temple, the sorcerer tribe will fight you to the death. The elder Wu's knees were broken and he could only kneel on the ground. His eyes were filled with tears of blood as he roared at Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Yi Xian ignored elder Wu's angry roar. A cruel smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. As he slammed his palm towards the ancestral sorcerer temple, the entire world rumbled and exploded. A huge palm that covered the sky condensed in the sky, bringing with it a destructive aura as it fell towards the ancestral sorcerer temple. However, it was also at this moment that the ancestral sorcerer temple suddenly turned illusory, and the sound of chanting could be heard from the void of the heavens. Ancient scriptures were being chanted and runes of the sorcerer tribe spread out from the ancestral sorcerer temple. The huge palm that covered the sky was being destroyed inch by inch until it turned into flowing light and disappeared with the wind. The ancestral sorcerer has manifested, the ancestral sorcerer has manifested. Such a scene caused old Wu to be dumbfounded. Then, an expression of ecstasy appeared on his face. He excitedly roared, and his originally pale and bloodless face flushed red. The power of time. Looking at the divine light that was released from the ancestral sorcerer temple, Yi Xian's face was gloomy and uncertain. However, the coldness in his eyes became more intense, and he had no intention of retreating. Yi Xian was a very smart person, and he would never put himself in danger. He dared to lead the celestial court to attack the sorcerer tribe because he knew that the 12 ancient sorcerers were in a deep sleep and were not in the sorcerer tribe's world at all. This information was also obtained from the sword demon in the past. This was also the reason why Yi Xian dared to attack the sorcerer tribe. After all, Yi Xian himself knew that if he were to face the 12 ancient sorcerers, he would not be a match for them at all. However, at this moment, the light that was released from the ancestral sorcerer temple was filled with the power of time. Although the power of time was extremely weak, it still offset his attack that was about to destroy the ancestral sorcerer temple. This is getting interesting. Yi Xian did not attack again. He narrowed his eyes and walked towards the ancestral sorcerer temple. He even stepped into the ancestral sorcerer temple under Elder Wu's shocked gaze. Inside the ancestral sorcerer temple, incense smoke lingered in the air, and the surroundings were solemn. A black statue stood in the middle, and at this moment, it was releasing a majestic divine light. Mysterious sorcerer tribe characters surrounded the statue, causing one's soul to be in a trance at a glance. The black statue had the head of a dragon and the body of a human. It even had 8 arms, and scales covered its entire body, making it impossible to tell what species the statue was. However, Yi Xian knew that this was the Candle Dragon's original appearance. Time Ancestral Sorcerer. Yi Xian slowly walked towards the ancestral sorcerer temple as he muttered to himself. His eyes were releasing a deep light. Yi Xian had always had a question, and this question was about his future self. Back then, he was saved by his future self at the Nuwa Grand Banquet, and he even saw his future self with his own eyes. This question had always filled his heart. There were two major forces in the world that could not be controlled. One was the power of space, and the other was the power of time. When the two were combined into one, it was also called the power of spacetime. This power of spacetime existed in the three realms, but living beings could not control it, nor could they cultivate it on their own. Yi Xian's question was that he had never cultivated the power of time, nor had he come into contact with the power of space. Even if he became a sage in the future, how could his future self reverse spacetime and return to the past? This question had always been in Yi Xian's heart. The immortal scripture was indeed powerful, but there was no method to cultivate spacetime in it. However, Yi Xian felt the power of time released by the ancestral sorcerer temple today, and this gave him a premonition that perhaps the ancestral sorcerer temple had an opportunity for him. The power of spacetime could not be controlled, but there were exceptions. One of the 12 ancestral sorcerers, the Candle Dragon, controlled the power of time. This was his innate divine ability, and he had it since the day he was born. There was another ancestral sorcerer who controlled the power of space. These two ancestral sorcerers were extremely powerful among the 12 ancestral sorcerers. If someone could possess the innate divine ability of these two ancestral sorcerers, it would be an extremely terrifying thing. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in the ancestral sorcerer temple, silently staring at the Candle Dragon statue. He was also calmly sensing the weak power of time. Unfortunately, no matter how hard Yi Xian tried to sense it, the power of time was too illusory, and he could not grasp it at all. Yi Xian had an ambition that he had never told anyone before, and that was his desire for the power of spacetime. If he could travel to the past and the future, he would definitely be able to make up for the regrets in his life. However, tens of thousands of years had passed, and the so-called power of spacetime was only a legend. Although Yi Xian had this desire, he had never come into contact with these two powers. However, today, when he was about to destroy the ancestral sorcerer temple, the Candle Dragon statue released a trace of the power of time, and actually dissolved his attack. This once again triggered Yi Xian's hidden ambition. That's right, Yi Xian wanted to find the key to cultivating the power of spacetime, and even more, he wanted to step into the threshold of the power of spacetime. This was because he had too many regrets that he wanted to make up for. Only by reversing the river of time could he make up for those regrets. Suddenly, Yi Xian's eyes froze, and his entire body stiffened as if he had been struck by lightning. An inconspicuous object had appeared in front of his eyes, causing his body to tremble slightly. Chapter 672. This is. Yi Xian quickly walked forward, and even his voice was trembling. This was because there was a protruding piece of white jade embedded in the white jade table where the Candle Dragon statue was enshrined. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice anything strange about this piece of jade. Crack! Yi Xian's eyes were solemn. He directly broke the white jade out of the jade table, revealing the original appearance of the jade. The jade was milky white and had an ancient pattern. It didn't leak any aura, but this jade didn't seem to be complete, as if it had been cut in half from the middle. Its shape was very strange. Suddenly, Yi Xian waved his hand and summoned the Bronze Immortal Sutra. The pages of the sutra flipped, and when the last page was flipped, a small cauldron appeared. Yi Xian held the jade in his hand and compared it. It really is this thing. After a dozen breaths of time, Yi Xian's face was flushed red, and his voice was trembling. This proved how excited he was. Yi Xian was a very calm person. Even if the sky collapsed, he wouldn't be moved. But now that he was so excited, it proved that the origin of the jade in his hand was not simple. In the past, in the North Sea Dragon Palace, Yi Xian had seized a mysterious small cauldron from Taoist Fire Crow. This mysterious small cauldron had fused with the bronze Immortal Sutra, allowing Yi Xian to obtain the Tribulation Transcender transformation. Yi Xian had never forgotten this matter. This was because he had relied on the Tribulation Transcender transformation to kill the Jade Emperor. It was also because of the Tribulation Transcender transformation that he was able to face so many great enemies. The white jade in his hand was similar to the small cauldron he had obtained in the past. The only difference was that the jade in his hand didn't have the original appearance of the small cauldron. It was as if someone had cut it in half and it was an incomplete small cauldron. However, Yi Xian's memory of the small cauldron's pattern was still fresh. Perhaps if it were someone else, they wouldn't even notice this small cauldron and would only think of it as a strange stone. However, Yi Xian was different. He still remembered the shape and appearance of the tiny cauldron. At that time, he had guessed that there was more than one tiny cauldron and that there should be other tiny cauldrons. Because the Bronze Immortal Sutra's pages were all blank, perhaps every time he obtained a small cauldron, it would fuse with the Bronze Immortal Sutra. Sure enough, Yi Xian's guess was right. He had inadvertently obtained half of a small cauldron in the ancestral shaman temple. Although it was incomplete, it made him so excited that he could not control himself. In the past, he obtained a mysterious small cauldron, which allowed him to obtain the Tribulation Transcender transformation from the Bronze Immortal Scripture. If he could find a complete small cauldron again, what would happen to the Bronze Immortal Scripture? Yi Xian was trying his best to control his emotions. He kept telling himself to calm down, but even after dozens of breaths, he was still unable to calm down. It was no wonder that Yi Xian lost his composure. One had to know that the Bronze Immortal Scripture was extremely mysterious. It even had two heaven-defying techniques, the Tribulation Transcender technique and the Tribulation Transcender transformation. However, the Bronze Immortal Scripture was incomplete and seemed to need the mysterious small cauldron to complete it. Only then could its true function be displayed. After a full 2 hours, Yi Xian slowly inhaled and exhaled. He finally calmed himself down and placed half of the small cauldron into his bag with extreme care. However, his eyes were deep as if he was thinking about something. The people of the shaman tribe definitely don't know the function of this item. Otherwise, they wouldn't have embedded it in the jade case. Perhaps the other half of the cauldron can be found in other ancestral shaman temples. Yi Xian muttered gloomily. A ruthless look flashed in his eyes and he made an extremely crazy decision in his heart. Rumble. Yi Xian released infinite divine light and an extremely terrifying airwave burst out. The ancestral shaman temple collapsed inch by inch and the candle dragon statue instantly turned into ashes. Although the ancestral shaman temple had a weak power of time, it was still a statue and not the candle dragon himself. With Yi Xian's current cultivation level, it was easy for him to destroy the ancestral shaman temple. Moreover, Yi Xian could not let outsiders know about the secret of the small cauldron. It was related to his own cultivation path. Yi Xian, you brat, you will die a horrible death. The ancestral shaman temple was destroyed and Elder Wu cursed with hatred. Tears rolled down from his eyes. However, Yi Xian walked out of the smoke and dust that filled the sky and regained his cruel and ruthless expression. You can die now. The 6 desires were heartless, and the heavens and earth were heartless. Yi Xian laughed sinisterly. When he pointed out with his finger, chaotic divine light surged out and was about to kill Elder Wu on the spot. Rumble. Suddenly, demonic light covered the sky, and black clouds covered the sky. Bolts of black lightning rolled in the clouds, and the entire ancestral Magus mountain trembled violently. The ground slowly cracked open, and a tall and sturdy figure walked out from the ground. You killed my people and destroyed my ancestral shaman temple. Today, you will die. The demonic light was Tong Tian. He dominated the sky and the earth. His voice was vast and mighty. He did not seem to have done anything, but he blocked Yi Xian's chaotic divine light with just one palm and saved Elder Wu from Yi Xian. Break! There was a loud explosion and demonic light surged. The person turned his palm into a knife and the sky-splitting knife radiance crossed the sky and slashed the inverse immortal array. The 8 gates of life and death shattered and the sorcerer tribe who were fighting in the ancestral shaman mountain roared excitedly. Greetings, ancient sorcerer. The roar shattered mountains and rivers. The sorcerer tribe in the entire ancestral shaman mountain roared loudly. Obviously, the person who appeared was extremely terrifying and was a peerless expert of the sorcerer tribe. Qi Yu, kill him. Suddenly, Elder Wu let out a shrill roar as he glared at Yi Xian. His eyes were filled with endless hatred. Qi Yu. The demon god of the ancient sorcerer tribe was ranked above the great sorcerer. He was a man like a demon god and one of the ancient sorcerers of the sorcerer tribe. His cultivation was unfathomable and was comparable to a sage to be who had severed 2 corpses. He was sleeping on the ground. He was the guardian of the shaman tribe and the only ancient shaman who guarded the ancestral land of the shaman tribe. Today, when the ancestral shaman temple was destroyed, he woke up from his deep sleep and finally came out at the last critical moment. Qi! Qi! The sky-swallowing toad, Shen Gongbao, and the others returned to Yi Xian's side, bathed in blood. However, all of them were covered in blood. Clearly, they had all suffered serious injuries in this battle. Out of 10 million celestial soldiers and celestial generals, more than 3 million had died. This was not a small number, but the price of waging war against the sorcerer tribe. After paying such a heavy price, the sorcerer tribe did not have it easy either. Tens of thousands of sorcerer tribe members had died tragically in the ancestral shaman mountain. Although the shamans were few in number, every single one of them was an extremely powerful existence. They could even fight against 100 races by themselves. This was also the reason why Shen Gongbao wanted to persuade Yi Xian not to start a war with the shamans. This was because the celestial court was no match for the sorcerer tribe. This time, both sides had suffered heavy losses. However, the sorcerer tribe had only lost 1 ancestral shaman mountain. There were 11 other ancestral shaman mountains in the sorcerer world. There were also many ordinary sorcerer tribe members in the 8 heavens and earth. The celestial court could not destroy them. Chapter 673. At this moment, the immortals and demons were solemn and the atmosphere was oppressive. Everyone could see that the legendary demon god of the sorcerer tribe had appeared. He was a great enemy of the world. Whether it was them or Yi Xian, they would be caught in an unimaginably bitter battle. Qi Yu. Yi Xian said in a low voice. He kept scrutinizing the legendary demon god, and a gloomy light flashed across his eyes. You deserve to die for killing tens of thousands of my people. Qi Yu looked just like a human. He was dressed in black, but there were 2 horns on his head. His eyes were blood red, and his fangs were exposed. The chaotic devil light around him was extremely fierce, and it made people feel extremely oppressed just by looking at him. Ha! Suddenly, Yi Xian let out a wild laugh. However, his smile was extremely unruly and contained a hint of viciousness. His gaze towards Qi Yu was filled with eerie killing intent. So what if you're an ancient sorcerer? Do you think you can kill me? Yi Xian said coldly. How dare you? You won't be able to leave today. Qi Yu had been in a deep sleep for countless years. He did not know who Yi Xian was, but he did not want to know. In his eyes, Yi Xian was already a dead man. He was the guardian of the sorcerer tribe. Yi Xian had been put on the list of people who must die because he dared to kill his people and destroy the ancestral sorcerer temple. Rumble. A pair of demonic fists shattered the heavens and earth. It was as if 2 ancient demonic mountains had descended into the world and were smashing towards Yi Xian. Qi Yu reappeared the might of the ancient demon gods and was about to directly kill Yi Xian between heaven and earth. Back off, all of you. Yi Xian's eyes were gloomy. He immediately ordered the sky-swallowing toad and the others to back off. Qi Yu was too terrifying. If the celestial court troops continued to stay on the scene, they would probably die tragically under Qi Yu's demon fists. The celestial court troops quickly retreated from the ancestral sorcerer mountain. It was also at this moment that Yi Xian laughed wildly. He also raised his demon fists and blasted them toward the legendary demon god. Kill. Although Yi Xian was only a half-step sage to be, he walked the path of proving the way by strength. His combat strength was unimaginably terrifying. Although Qi Yu was an ancient sorcerer of the Wu tribe and possessed the cultivation to cut off 2 corpses, which was much higher than Yi Xian's, this was not enough to make Yi Xian retreat without a fight. Bang bang bang. As an ancient shaman of the sorcerer tribe, Qi Yu's physical body was extremely powerful. His surging demonic power shattered the world and violently hammered toward Yi Xian. As Yi Xian retreated, the origin immortal body shone with dazzling light, a grim light flitting through his eyes. In this clash of physical bodies, he was clearly at a disadvantage. Such a thing had never happened in tens of thousands of years, but today, Yi Xian finally felt the terror of the physical body of the Wu tribe. As an ancient sorcerer of the Wu tribe, Qi Yu's physical body was even stronger than his. He could not gain any advantage at all. Yi Xian was retreating step by step. No matter if it was in terms of cultivation or physical strength, he wasn't a match for Qi Yu. He was already at a complete disadvantage and was barely able to resist Qi Yu's tyrannical attacks. Although Qi Yu's attacks were extremely terrifying and suppressed Yi Xian, his heart was already in turmoil. Although Yi Xian was at a disadvantage, he could not suppress Yi Xian. Qi Yu had 2 trump cards. One was his powerful ancient sorcerer body, and the other was the Dharma Laksana of the demon god. These were also his innate magic skills. However, his ancient sorcerer body could not suppress Yi Xian, which made Qi Yu surprised. He did not know what method Yi Xian cultivated that his physical body was comparable to his. This man must die. Otherwise, he would definitely be a great threat to the Wu tribe in the future. An extremely terrifying thought arose in Qi Yu's heart. This also caused his eyes to turn extremely cold. The killing techniques in his hands became even more berserk, and he had already faintly used his own cultivation. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Yi Xian between heaven and earth. You're still far from being able to kill me. In the face of Qi Yu's violent and ruthless attacks, Yi Xian's face was ferocious and cruel. He formed the immortal spell with both hands, and a wisp of dark fog suddenly surrounded him. Tribulation Transcender Transformation. Rumble. The world was dark, and the blood moon descended. The blood moon grew in the sky, and the sound of waves of the blood sea rumbled. As the blood moon fell, Yi Xian's forehead glowed, and a blood moon mark flashed between his eyebrows. Buzz. Yi Xian's essence, qi, and spirit were sublimated to the extreme, and his cultivation was rising steadily. An aura of nirvana burst out, and he showed a domineering posture. A pair of demonic fists violently attacked Qi Yu. Bang! 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 The mountains exploded, and the earth sank. Although the ancestral sorcerer mountain was a chaotic divine mountain, when the 2 supreme figures fought each other, it gradually couldn't bear the power of the 2 and gradually collapsed. Come, come, come. Let this emperor see how powerful you, the demon god of the sorcerer clan, are. Yi Xian seemed to have fallen into a state of madness. The Tribulation Transcender transformation allowed him to increase his realm by 1 level in 2 hours. This was also the heaven-defying aspect of the Tribulation Transcender transformation, and it also gave Yi Xian the strength to fight against Qi Yu. How is this possible? In the face of Yi Xian's violent attacks, Qi Yu roared in horror. Just a moment ago, Yi Xian was suppressed by him, but in an instant, his cultivation had increased to such a terrifying level. This simply shocked Qi Yu to the extreme. No matter what technique you cultivate, I will definitely kill you here today. Qi Yu suddenly roared. As an ancient sorcerer of the sorcerer clan, not only was his physical body incomparably strong, but his magical power was also terrifying. A monstrous demonic shadow appeared behind him, and the space and time in this area were slightly distorted. Rumble. Mountains and rivers were collapsing, and the ancestral sorcerer mountain was collapsing. The earth for thousands of miles was cracked like a spider web, and huge gullies appeared. A large amount of water also erupted from the ground. Yi Xian punched out, and it was like a huge star falling to the earth. Qiyu barely dodged it, but this fist light pierced through the vast earth, and magma spewed out. The rich smell of gunpowder filled the world. "You're courting death." Qiyu was furious. He counterattacked with a backhand strike. The two demonic fists were too surging and too resplendent. They directly smashed towards Yi Xian, and contained his supreme cultivation. Bang! Light and shadow intertwined, and the earth and sky were turned upside down. The two punched each other, and the energy that burst out was enough to destroy the world. It directly turned the sky and earth into a vacuum, and the dust that filled the sky also covered the two figures. Bang! 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 The battle continued, and blood splattered everywhere. In the dust and smoke, no one could see the situation of the two clearly. However, blood kept falling from the sky, proving how intense the battle was. Rumble. Strong winds blew, and the dust and smoke dissipated. The two figures appeared again. Traces of blood flowed from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. His face was slightly pale, and it was obvious that he had suffered heavy injuries in the fierce battle with Qiyu. Qiyu's hair was messy, and his blood-red eyes were frozen. Blood also flowed out of his mouth. It was obvious that after this fierce battle, he did not have any advantage. "Boy, I underestimated you, but you will definitely die today." Qiyu growled. Tong Tian demonic light burst out, and a spot of demonic light grew in front of him. Qiyu saber. Buzz. The world was in chaos, and the saber light pierced through the sky. A demonic saber was born in the void, and a ferocious aura bloomed on the saber. An extremely terrifying and fierce aura soared into the sky, and it stirred the wind and clouds in all directions, causing the world to faintly show signs of collapsing. With the demonic saber in hand, he dominated the world. When Qiyu held the demonic saber, his aura rose violently again. The demonic saber in his hand was emitting a terrifying buzzing sound, and a fierce demonic light was surging on the saber. Yi Xian sneered and said, "You are still far from being able to compete with weapons. Halberd, come." The world was in chaos, and the darkness was boundless. Yi Xian's cruel roar came from all directions. The space between his eyebrows glowed, and the 3-inch halberd rippled out. The boundless darkness covered the world of the sorcerer tribe, and only the murderous aura bloomed on the halberd. Buzz! The 3-inch halberd expanded in the wind until it became a 3-foot-long halberd in Yi Xian's hand. When Yi Xian pointed the halberd at Qiyu in the void, the chaotic divine thunder rumbled in the boundless dark clouds. Chapter 674. The Qiyu saber was extremely fierce and demonic. It was an extremely terrifying ancient demonic weapon. During the Great War of the Shamans and Demons, Qiyu had killed countless demons and refined it with the blood of hundreds of millions of demons. The day the saber was completed, it was an extremely terrifying demonic weapon. With the Qiyu demonic saber in hand, it meant that he was going all out. He had already treated Yi Xian as a dead man because no one could survive under the Qiyu saber. Die! The demonic saber was shocking and ferocious. When Qiyu slashed out, the saber radiance appeared and slashed towards Yi Xian like a waterfall from the 9 heavens. The darkness was boundless and murderous. Yi Xian laughed maniacally. Perhaps others would be afraid of the demonic saber in Qiyu's hand, but the heaven-destroying halberd was the #1 killing weapon in history. Yi Xian did not take the Qiyu saber seriously at all. Rumble. When the halberd struck out, the heavens fell and the earth cracked. The halberd was too dark and too bright. The dark aura that could destroy everything rumbled and surged. A cold light that penetrated the heavens and earth bloomed. Clang! The two weapons clashed. With a loud explosion, the heavens and earth within thousands of miles were distorted. It was as if the heavens and earth were going to collapse under the attack of the two. Puff! With a groan, flesh and blood were cut off. An extremely shocking thing happened. The heaven-destroying halberd ignored the power of the Qiyu saber and sent it flying. The ancient demonic saber let out a sorrowful cry. The cold tip of the halberd pierced through Qiyu's shoulder blade, causing the demon god of the shaman tribe to groan in pain. Ancient shaman. Qiyu. The shamans were shocked. The shaman elder roared in shock. All the shamans who saw this scene could not believe their eyes. The demon god of the shaman tribe, Qiyu, was injured by Yi Xian's halberd. On the other side, the members of the celestial court cheered and shouted Yi Xian's name. There were even yellow-scarved strongmen beating the war drums. In an instant, their morale was boosted. Retreat! Qiyu's shoulder blade was pierced through by the heaven-destroying halberd. His face was gloomy as he retreated thousands of miles away. He even kept a safe distance from Yi Xian. Huff, huff, huff. Extremely heavy breathing could be heard coming out of Qiyu's mouth and nose. A horrible bloody hole appeared on his shoulder, from which a large amount of blood gushed out and dyed his burly body red. What is this halberd? With the Qiyu demonic saber in his hand, he was staring at the heaven-destroying halberd in Yi Xian's hand. A loud rumbling sound came from his mouth. Obviously, in the clash of weapons, the demonic saber in his hand was no match for the heaven-destroying halberd. This had already set off a storm in his heart. No one knew what Qiyu was feeling at this moment. Although the devil saber in his hand was not well known in the world, it was a world-shocking devil saber. It had killed countless ancient demons and was not inferior to those primordial spiritual treasures. The artifact had a spirit, and the owner knew it. Qiyu could feel that the demonic saber was afraid of the weapon in Yi Xian's hand. This was something that had never happened since the saber was born. It was simply beyond his imagination. Are you afraid? At this moment, Yi Xian pointed the heaven-punishing halberd at Qiyu from afar. The corners of his mouth curled into a contemptuous smile, causing Qiyu to be enraged. He let out a heaven-shaking roar as he charged towards Yi Xian once again. Today, you will definitely die. Rumble. The demonic saber was resplendent and the saber radiance illuminated the sky. Tongtian's demonic light was blooming to the extreme. As the demonic god of the sorcerer tribe, Qiyu would not allow himself to retreat. Even if the opponent's weapon was extremely terrifying, it was not a reason for him to retreat. Clang! 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 The saber and halberd collided. Heaven and earth were upside down, the void was collapsing and the world was twisting. When the two of them fought again, not only were the saber and halberd clashing, but also the terrifying killing arts. For a moment, the battle between the two of them had reached a white-hot stage. Blood splattered across the sky and the world wailed. The heaven-destroying halberd in Yi Xian's hands exploded with boundless power. Every strike of the halberd caused Qiyu to feel unimaginable pressure. Although his physical body was stronger than Yi Xian's, his so-called physical body was completely vulnerable in the face of the #1 killing weapon of all time. Terrifying bloody holes appeared all over Qiyu's body. Large amounts of blood dyed his body red. However, under the divine skill of the sorcerer tribe, Qiyu's body quickly recovered. However, his face became increasingly pale. Obviously, the divine skill of the sorcerer tribe to recover the physical body could not be used endlessly. As he suffered more and more injuries, he would die under the heaven-destroying halberd sooner or later. Of course, in the white-hot battle between the two of them, Qiyu was at a disadvantage because of the heaven-destroying halberd and had suffered great injuries. However, this did not mean that Yi Xian had the upper hand. After all, Qiyu was an ancient sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe and a demon god of the sorcerer tribe. His cultivation was comparable to a quasi-sage who had severed two corpses. This was his true cultivation, and it was something that he had cultivated for countless years. However, Yi Xian was different. His aura gradually began to dim because the time for the tribulation transcender transformation was almost up. This also caused his combat strength to continue to decline. Although the tribulation transcender transformation was a heaven-defying technique that could raise Yi Xian's realm, one should not forget that this was only a secret technique and not Yi Xian's true cultivation. The tribulation transcender transformation only lasted for 2 hours. After 2 hours, Yi Xian would return to his original state. This was also the limit of the tribulation transcender transformation. If Yi Xian could always be in the state of the tribulation transcender transformation, then the tribulation transcender transformation would not be called a heaven-defying technique, but an invincible technique. Everything went round and round, and the world had its ups and downs. No technique was perfect, and the tribulation transcender transformation was no exception. At this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have fallen into a frenzy as he violently attacked Qiyu. This was because he could already feel that his cultivation was regressing, and the after-effects of the tribulation transcender transformation were slowly becoming apparent. He was afraid that in less than 10 breaths of time, the blessing of the tribulation transcender transformation would completely dissipate. Therefore, when Yi Xian's tribulation transcender transformation completely disappeared, not to mention killing Qiyu, he had to severely injure him to the point of death. Otherwise, when the blessing of the tribulation transcender transformation dissipated, he would definitely fall into a predicament. Qiyu awkwardly avoided the sharp edge of the punishing heaven halberd, and the demonic saber in his hand slashed at Yi Xian from time to time. As an ancient sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe, Qiyu was not stupid. He could already feel that Yi Xian's cultivation was regressing, which made him happy. He did not want to fight Yi Xian head-on. Die! Suddenly, Yi Xian cruelly roared, and the punishing heaven halberd rumbled. Boundless darkness covered the sky, and the punishing heaven halberd smashed down towards Qiyu. Obviously, this was Yi Xian's strongest attack. He wanted to suppress Qiyu before the tribulation transcender transformation completely disappeared. Die! Facing Yi Xian's world-destroying attack, Qiyu's complexion changed greatly. This was because Yi Xian's attack had already locked onto him, and he could not avoid it at all. He could only slash at Yi Xian with his saber, hoping to force Yi Xian to retreat. But then, something terrible happened. Yi Xian's halberd smashed down towards Qiyu, and the demonic saber in Qiyu's hand also attacked him. However, under Qiyu's horrified gaze, Yi Xian did not dodge at all. He directly ignored his saber and continued to bombard him. Chapter 675. Qi. Blood splattered everywhere, and it was extremely tragic. One of Yi Xian's arms was cut off by the demonic saber, and blood splattered all over the sky. However, the heaven-punishing halberd also smashed into Qiyu's body at this moment, causing half of his body to explode without a trace. Celestial Emperor. Ancient Shaman. Shocked cries came from all directions. No one had expected such an outcome. Buzz. The blessing of the tribulation transcender transformation finally dissipated. Yi Xian's flushed face turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood essence. He held the arm that was cut off by the demonic saber in his hand and then directly put it back on his arm. As a terrifying mist surrounded his arm was restored to its original state. However, the aura around Yi Xian's body had become extremely weak. Bang! At the same time, Qiyu suffered Yi Xian's peerless attack. Half of his body had been annihilated, and his entire body slammed into the peak of the ancestral shaman mountain. A human-shaped pit also appeared. Protect the ancient shaman. Old shaman roared with a trembling voice. Hundreds of great shamans shot over and stood on the peak of the ancestral shaman mountain. They looked at Yi Xian in the sky with heavy expressions. However, an extremely oppressive atmosphere grew between heaven and earth. Back off. Suddenly, a low roar of anger was heard. The human-shaped pit shook violently. Qi Yu only had half of his body left, but he was slowly standing up. This made the sorcerer tribesmen ecstatic, and they all looked towards Qi Yu. Rumble. Shaman light was the Tongtian. The world buzzed, and a total of 12 Tongtian shaman lights gathered from all directions at the peak of the ancestral shaman mountain. The wind and clouds rumbled and rolled, covering Qi Yu's broken body. Something terrible happened. Under the cover of the 12 Tongtian shaman lights, Qi Yu's flesh and blood grew, and an extremely terrifying aura burst out. When the 12 Tongtian shaman lights slowly dissipated, Qi Yu appeared intact. Yi Xian, I have to say that you are indeed a peerless figure. If it were any other place, I would have died at your hands. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have come to the ancestral land of the shamans. This is also the way to your death. Rumble. Qi Yu stepped into the sky and was walking toward Yi Xian. The Tongtian shaman lights around him penetrated the ground, and the demonic saber in his hand made clanging sounds. The world of the sorcerer tribe was built by the 12 ancient sorcerers. It was supported by the will of the ancient sorcerers and protected by their power. It was the pure land of the sorcerer tribe and the holy land of the sorcerer tribe. Qi Yu. He slowly raised the demonic saber and pointed it at Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian as if he was looking at a dead man. If we weren't enemies, I would be willing to be friends with you because you are the second person I truly admire. Unfortunately, you killed tens of thousands of my shaman clan members, destroyed the ancestral shaman temple, and almost caused this shaman's body to explode. Today, you can only die to atone for your sins. Qi Yu no longer had a ferocious expression on his face. He calmly spoke because Yi Xian was destined to die today. Celestial Emperor, leave quickly. The Celestial Court. Many people roared, but everyone's eyes were filled with despair. They could see that Yi Xian's cultivation had fallen greatly and he was no match for Qi Yu. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in the sky with his halberd in hand. His eyes calmly looked at Qi Yu, and a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Do you think you can kill me? Yi Xian said calmly. Qi Yu was slightly stunned when he heard Yi Xian's words. His gaze towards Yi Xian revealed a trace of bewilderment, and an extremely bad premonition arose from the bottom of his heart. Do you think you can survive? Qi Yu said coldly. I don't know if my brother can survive, but you, old son, are here. You can try. Suddenly, a ferocious and unruly voice echoed in all directions. A demonic light appeared beside Yi Xian, and as the demonic light gradually dissipated, Sun Wukong was seen wearing black armor and holding an iron rod in his hand as he coldly looked at Qi Yu. Elder brother. Yi Xian smiled. A worthy younger brother, you are really bold. You dare to bring the Celestial Court to the sorcerer tribe. Even old Sun did not have your courage back then. Sun Wukong laughed arrogantly and patted Yi Xian's shoulder. However, he still looked coldly at Qi Yu and pointed his iron rod at him. Who are you? Sun Wukong's appearance made Qi Yu's expression change. Although he could feel that Sun Wukong's cultivation was not strong, Sun Wukong gave him a strong sense of threat. The great sage, heaven's equal. Sun Wukong swung his iron rod as if he was swinging the universe. When his voice rang out, it made the world shake violently as if it was about to collapse. The great sage, heaven's equal. Qi Yu was surprised. He had never heard of this name and did not know who Sun Wukong was. After the great witch demon tribulation, he had been sleeping in the world of the sorcerer tribe. Sun Wukong was a descendant, so he naturally did not know him. However, Chiyu could feel that the monkey in front of him gave him a strong sense of threat. It was an indescribable feeling, but it really existed in his heart. After 3 breaths, Chiyu narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "No matter who you are, I hope you will not meddle in the affairs of the sorcerer tribe." Ha! Legend has it that demon god Chiyu is powerful. I wonder if you can defeat the iron rod in Old Sun's hand? Sun Wukong laughed wildly. He had an unruly and lawless aura. He looked at Chiyu with a fiery gaze. "Do you want to die?" Chiyu said eerily after being provoked by Sun Wukong. "Come, let Old Sun see how you, the demon god of the sorcerer tribe, can kill Old Sun." Sun Wukong was wearing black armor. Tongtian's demonic light exploded in the sky, and there was even the light of immortals and Buddhas rippling out. The iron rod in his hand buzzed and exploded, and an extremely terrifying battle aura erupted. "Brother, Old Sun has a technique called the Battle Saint Technique. Today, I will let you see it. If you are interested, you can learn it." Sun Wukong laughed arrogantly, and his golden eyes suddenly brightened. When he shook his body, his golden hair stood on end, and a terrifying battle aura rumbled and surged. "Take this." The iron rod shook the sky, and the battle aura suppressed the past and the present. The iron rod in Sun Wukong's hand suddenly expanded until it was 100,000 miles long. It was like a pillar that supported the sky, and with the battle aura, it smashed violently towards Chiyu. "How dare you!" Chiyu's demonic saber in his hand set off thousands of saber rays and slashed towards Sun Wukong violently. The two of them were completely engaged in battle. Chapter 676. How dare you! With the Chiyu demonic saber in his hand, thousands of saber radiances slashed towards Sun Wukong violently, causing the two of them to engage in a fierce battle. Clang! 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 Sun Wukong's transcendence whirled an iron cudgel swept across the sky. Although Sun Wukong had destroyed his 3 corpses to become a saint, his cultivation was too terrifying and could not be compared to an ordinary person. The Battle Saint technique was an extremely terrifying and heaven-defying technique. It directly caused Sun Wukong and Chiyu to be locked in a fierce battle. Even though Chiyu was an ancient demon god, he could not suppress Sun Wukong. The firmament shook and the void collapsed. Spatial cracks appeared in the boundless heaven and earth. This was caused by the fierce battle between the two of them. The terrifying aftermath of the fierce battle caused the heaven and earth to turn into a vacuum. At this moment, Yi Xian looked directly at the battle. A fiery look flashed across his eyes. Although he did not know what the Battle Saint technique that Sun Wukong had mentioned was, at this moment, Sun Wukong's combat strength was rising steadily. It was simply unimaginably fierce. After the creation of heaven and earth, all things were born. Over the endless years, there was no lack of earth-shattering figures in this world. They were the favorites of an era, and even more so, they were people who dominated the world. Yi Xian asked himself. He had only seen 2 amazing people in his life. The first was Liu Baiyi from the mortal world. During the Dharma ending period, he was able to create the inverse immortal formation. This was a peerless formation that could even trap immortals. The second was Sun Wukong. Regardless of his cultivation or combat strength, he was amazing. He was comparable to the people of the untainted land and was not at a disadvantage at all. Battle Saint technique, what a powerful secret technique. Yi Xian nodded slowly and praised from the bottom of his heart. The firmament shook and the clouds exploded. The battle between the two of them was too fierce. It was not inferior to the battle between Chiyu and Yi Xian. After all, Chiyu was an ancient demon god. Although Sun Wukong's combat strength was indeed heaven-defying, it did not make Chiyu retreat at all. Heaven Emperor, it's time to retreat. Shingongbao bowed, his eyes heavy. Obviously, the celestial court had paid a heavy price to exterminate tens of thousands of sorcerer tribesmen. Yi Xian had also destroyed the ancestral sorcerer temple with his own hands. This was already a heavy blow to the sorcerer tribe. If this continued, the celestial court would be completely destroyed. Hearing Shen Gongbao's persuasion, how could Yi Xian not know what he was thinking? However, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, with a trace of gloominess flashing across his eyes. Then, he slowly shook his head and directly rejected Shen Gongbao's proposal. Heavenly Emperor, now that the great sage is here to fend off Qi Yu, we should know when to stop. Before Shen Gongbao could finish, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted, I have my own decision. You don't have to say anything. Sigh. Shen Gongbao sighed in his heart and could only leave. He knew that he could not change Yi Xian's decision, which also made him worried. He did not know how to end this attack on the Wu tribe. How could Yi Xian not know what Shen Gongbao was thinking? In fact, after killing tens of thousands of sorcerer tribesmen and destroying the ancestral sorcerer temple, Yi Xian also knew that he should stop while he was ahead. Leaving the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe with the troops of the celestial court was a perfect ending. However, Yi Xian did not want to accept this perfect ending, because De Yi was not dead yet. He had to end this person with his own hands. This was also one of the reasons why he attacked the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe. The most important reason was that he had obtained half of the small tripod in the ancestral sorcerer temple. Yi Xian had a strong guess that the other half of the tripod was most likely in the sorcerer tribe. How could he just leave like this? The mysterious small tripod was extremely important to Yi Xian. It was more related to the bronze Immortal Sutra in his hands, and more importantly, to his future cultivation. It was impossible for Yi Xian to give up. Yi Xian had a premonition that if he really left like this, he was afraid that he would regret it for the rest of his life. Therefore, he could not leave until he found the other half of the small tripod. The sky shook, and the place was filled with light. The exploding light was extremely dazzling, and it was accompanied by a loud rumbling sound. The battle between Qi Yu and Sun Wukong became more and more intense. Cultivating 3 techniques at the same time, fighting heaven and earth. These simple words explained Sun Wukong's current state. Immortal, Buddha, and Demon were the 3 great techniques, and Sun Wukong was proficient in all of them. When these 3 famous techniques were combined into one, Sun Wukong's battle strength was simply terrifying beyond imagination. He was also supported by the Battle Saint technique, and was locked in battle with Qi Yu. The sky was pierced through, and space was collapsing. The battle between the two of them was too dazzling. Neither of them could suppress the other, and it gradually entered a white-hot stage. It would probably take a long time to determine the victor. At this moment, Yi Xian silently watched the battle, and a deep look flashed across his eyes. However, he did not join the battle, and it was even more impossible for him to join forces with Sun Wukong to kill Qi Yu. It was not that Yi Xian was soft-hearted, and he did not think that he was a gentleman. It was just that Sun Wukong had his own pride. Now that the two of them were fighting fairly, if he really interfered, it would be an insult to Sun Wukong. Moreover, the after-effects of his Calamity Transcender transformation had already appeared, and he was already in a weak state. Even if he joined the battle, he would not be able to play much of a role. At this moment, Yi Xian frowned. He was constantly thinking about how to deal with Qi Yu. If this continued to be delayed and another ancient shaman appeared, not to mention the celestial court's troops, even Sun Wukong would suffer a great calamity. This was not the result that he wanted to see. Suddenly, a green light grew between heaven and earth, and an illusory figure walked over from the horizon. It even faintly made the world stagnate, and an unimaginable aura filled the boundless sky. Boundless heaven and earth, borrow the power of the universe. Eternity was boundless, and heaven and earth were long. A green light that was tens of thousands of feet long fell toward the two people who were fighting fiercely, and an extremely terrifying aura bloomed between heaven and earth. Bang! There was a sky-high explosion, and light and shadow intertwined. Chi Yu and Sun Wukong were completely separated from each other after colliding with each other. They even dodged the green light and looked at the person who had come. At this moment, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked directly at the person who had come. A heavy look rose from the bottom of his eyes. Fellow Taoists, your hostility is too strong. Why don't you stop for the time being and listen to this humble Taoist? When the light gradually dissipated, a Taoist in green appeared. This person had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was dressed in Taoist attire, and he was dragging a green gourd in his hand. He gave off an extremely mysterious feeling. Lu, ya, Taoist. Suddenly, Chi Yu said the name of the person who had come. If one listened carefully, they would find that there was a trace of tremor in Chi Yu's voice, which also proved how agitated his heart was. Landia. Yi Xian frowned and kept looking at the Taoist in green. When he saw the green gourd in the Taoist's hand, a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. Buzz. Sun Wukong quietly returned to Yi Xian's side. He looked at Landia with surprise and bewilderment. Chapter 677. Brother, I once heard Patriarch Subhuti say that this Taoist Lu Ya's cultivation is extremely terrifying and he has an extremely great background. You and I must be careful. Sun Wukong secretly transmitted his voice. Hearing Sun Wukong's words, Yi Xian nodded secretly. Without Sun Wukong's words, he also knew that Landia was not to be trifled with. He was an extremely terrifying existence among the sages to be. Landia. No one knew where the sage-to-be of the untainted age came from, and no one knew where he came from. However, he had existed since the beginning of the world, and the most terrifying thing about him was the gourd in his hand. The gourd's origin was mysterious and extremely terrifying. Even the sages-to-be was extremely afraid of it. It even had a name that shocked the three realms. Immortal Flying Knife. The simple words were filled with extreme terror. Look at how arrogant and ferocious Chi Yu was. However, when Lu Ya appeared, the witchcraft light around him rumbled and surged. He had long defended himself tightly. He was afraid of the immortal slaying flying saber in Lu Ya's hand. It could cut off a person's head and destroy his primordial spirit. Anyone whose head was cut off by the immortal flying knife could not be reborn and would definitely die. Although Chi Yu was a member of the Wu tribe and the Wu tribe did not have primordial spirits, their bodies were no different from primordial spirits. Chi Yu's body was extremely terrifying, but he did not dare to take the immortal flying knife head-on. If his head was really cut off, he would really die tragically on the spot. Moreover, the immortal flying knife was only one of the reasons. The real reason that Chi Yu was afraid of was that Landia's identity was mysterious. It was suspected that he was not from the three realms. It was very likely that he was an innate spirit born in the chaos. An innate spirit was born in the chaos. It was said that when God Pangu created the world, 3,000 demon gods came to stop him. God Pangu killed all the 3,000 demon gods in anger and then created the world. That was how the untainted land appeared. The 3,000 demon gods were innate spirits. God Pangu was also an innate spirit. Ancestor Hung Jun was also an innate spirit. Landia's identity was mysterious. It was very likely that he was born in the chaos. First, there was Hung Jun, and then there was Tian. Taoist Landia was still in front. This was a saying that had been circulating among the quasi-sages. From this, it could be seen that Landia's background was extremely mysterious. Even among the quasi-sages, no one was willing to provoke him. Landia, this is a matter between the sorcerer tribe and the celestial court. May I know why you came to the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe? Chi Yu narrowed his eyes and spoke in a low voice. He was also testing Landia. Grand Immortal Zhen Yuan is a close friend of mine. When he heard that Yi Tiandi was being bullied by the sorcerer tribe, he specially invited me to come and help Yi Tiandi, Daoist Landia said with a smile and nodded at Yi Xian kindly. You. The thing that worried Qi Yu the most appeared. Qi Yu held his saber in his hand and stared fiercely at Landia. However, an extremely serious look flashed across his eyes. Sun Wukong alone was already difficult for him. At this moment, there was an even more terrifying Daoist Landia. This was a disaster that the sorcerer tribe could not imagine. How could Qi Yu not feel panic in his heart? Yes, Qi Yu was indeed very strong. He was an ancient sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe and was also known as the ancient demon god. However, this demon god also depended on who he was facing. At this moment, Yi Xian and Sun Wukong were eyeing him covetously. There was also Daoist Landia watching from the side. How could he help the sorcerer tribe survive this disaster alone? What should he do? An extremely difficult problem was placed in front of Qi Yu, causing him to be unable to advance or retreat. If he chose to directly fight with Luya, it was hard to say if he would be able to defeat Luya, not to mention that there was still Sun Wukong, who was on par with him in terms of battle prowess. Yi Xian's methods were even more cruel and ruthless, so he definitely wouldn't let the witch clan off so easily. Damn it! Qi Yu roared anxiously in his heart. He was extremely fierce, but he was not a reckless man. He knew that if he did not handle it well today, the sorcerer tribe would definitely suffer an unimaginable blow. At this moment, Qi Yu was extremely regretful. If he had known that Yi Xian was so ruthless, he would definitely have sent a message to the other ancient sorcerers to return to the sorcerer tribe. He would not have been in such a dilemma. If the other ancient sorcerers were here, Yi Xian would definitely die today. However, there was no medicine for regret in the world. Even if Qi Yu was extremely regretful, it was useless. Fellow Daoist, please calm down. I don't want to be enemies with the sorcerer tribe. The Celestial Court doesn't want to be enemies with the sorcerer tribe either. Why don't we sit down and have a talk and bury the hatchet? Daoist Luya smiled, then turned to look at Yi Xian. I wonder what Heavenly Emperor Yi thinks of this humble Daoist suggestion. Since fellow Landia has come forward, I must give you face. Yi Xian nodded slowly, but a strange look flashed across his eyes. Alright, since fellow Landia is willing to mediate, the sorcerer tribe is willing to give you face. Qi Yu put away the demonic saber and sighed quietly. If they continued to fight, with Daoist Landia on Yi Xian's side, he would definitely lose. It was even very likely that he would die. This was definitely not the outcome he wanted to see. On this day, the ancestral sorcerer mountain finally calmed down. A pavilion appeared on the ancestral sorcerer mountain. The four of them sat down in the pavilion. There was no longer any murderous aura, but the atmosphere had become strange and heavy. In the pavilion, there was a stone table and 4 stone stools. Other than that, there was nothing else. I already know about the enmity between the sorcerer tribe and the Celestial Court. It started because De Yi killed many immortals of the Celestial Court. Today, Yi Tiandi also killed tens of thousands of people of the sorcerer tribe and destroyed the ancestral sorcerer temple. Am I right? Landia said gently. I don't want to talk too much nonsense. Today, Yi Xian killed tens of thousands of people of the sorcerer tribe and destroyed the ancestral sorcerer temple with his own hands. This is enough to offset what De Yi did. From now on, the Celestial Court and the sorcerer tribe do not owe each other anything. Yi Tiandi, please lead the Celestial Court and leave the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe. Qi Yu said in a neither servile nor overbearing tone. If it was in the past, Qi Yu would definitely not let Yi Xian go. However, the situation now was beyond his control. He could only let Yi Xian leave first so that the sorcerer tribe could avoid this disaster. In the future, he would find Yi Xian to settle today's grudge. Ha! Suddenly, a cold laugh came from Sun Wukong. Do you really think we are 3-year-old children? You want us to leave with just a few words? Sun Wukong said coldly. Then what do you want? Chi Yu's expression was as gloomy as water. If Luya wasn't by his side, he would have definitely slashed at Sun Wukong and Yi Xian. How could he possibly feign civility with Yi Xian and Yi Xian? Fellow Taoist Chi Yu, please don't be angry. Actually, I did such a crazy thing in a moment of anger. I apologize to fellow Taoist Chi Yu. Suddenly, under the dumbfounded gazes of Sun Wukong and Daoist Luya, Yi Xian actually cupped his hands towards Chi Yu. His face carried an extremely sincere expression of apology. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. Sun Wukong and Landia were not the only ones who were speechless. Even Chi Yu, the demon god of the sorcerer tribe, felt like he was in a dream. He could not believe his ears and eyes. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.